Welcome, welcome. You're here at Cosmic Wand. Today we present to you what if Harry had an auto-farming system that trained him while he slept and woke up stronger than every professor. Like and subscribe if you want more awesome stories. Sit back, relax, and enjoy. Chapter 1, The Boy Who Woke Up Different. The hum started at 3:17 a.m., same as every night. Harry didn't set an alarm. He didn't need one. His body had its own clock now, had for years, and at 3:17 on the dot, his magic would surge, flood every nerve and vessel and bone, and the world behind his eyelids would turn white gold like staring into the sun. It didn't hurt. It hadn't hurt since he was 6. Before that, he remembered screaming into his pillow, his tiny body locking up as something enormous tried to fit itself inside something small, like pouring an ocean into a glass. The glass had cracked. Then it had grown. Now the glass was a lake. And every night, the ocean still poured. He lay on the thin mattress in the cupboard under the stairs, eyes closed, arms at his sides, and felt it happen. The surge rolled up from his chest, warm, electric, alive, and branched outward through his shoulders, down his arms, into his fingertips where it pooled and buzzed before cycling back toward his core. It moved like breathing, in and out, except each exhale left something behind. Thicker muscles. Denser bones. Reflexes that twitched faster than they had 12 hours ago. Knowledge he hadn't earned, sitting complete and whole in his mind like someone had slotted a book onto a shelf while he wasn't looking. Last night he'd absorbed ambient ward magic leaking from the blood protection on the house. His body had pulled it apart in his sleep, studied its architecture, understood its principles, and filed the knowledge away. Tonight it was something else, traces of transmutation magic from the broken television Uncle Vernon had chucked at the wall after a bad day at the office. The electronics were dead, but the magical residue Vernon didn't know existed had drifted through the floorboards, and Harry's system had eaten it the way a plant eats sunlight. That was the best way he'd ever found to describe it to himself: photosynthesis. Passive. Automatic. Relentless. By 3:41 the surge faded to its usual low hum, the second heartbeat behind his ribs that never quite stopped, and Harry opened his eyes in the dark. The cupboard was small, and he could see every inch of it without light. He'd been able to do that since he was 8. He could feel the spiders in the corner, feel their small warm heartbeats, feel the magic in the wood of the staircase above him, in the stone foundation below, in the ley line that ran 40 feet beneath the house, feeding the wards Dumbledore had planted and feeding him by extension. Harry Potter was 10 years old, and he was fairly certain he was the most dangerous thing on Privet Drive. Possibly in Surrey. Possibly further than that, though he couldn't be sure because he hadn't met everyone yet. He sat up, his head brushing the underside of the stairs, and stretched. The motion was smooth, controlled, not the awkward fumbling of a malnourished child in an oversized shirt. Petunia had stopped feeding him properly years ago, but his body didn't seem to care. It took what it needed from the magic and rebuilt itself, night after night. He was lean but solid, his movements precise in a way that would have looked strange on a kid his age if anyone had bothered to watch him closely. Nobody did. He pushed open the cupboard door and walked barefoot into the kitchen. It was still dark outside. The Dursleys wouldn't be up for hours. He opened the fridge, took out milk and bread, made himself toast, and ate standing at the counter, staring out the window at the sleeping street. Today was July 31st. His 11th birthday. He'd been waiting for this one. Not because of cake or presents. He'd never had either and didn't waste energy wanting things he wouldn't get. He'd been waiting because of the letters. They'd started arriving a week ago, addressed in green ink to Mr. H. Potter, the cupboard under the stairs, 4, Privet Drive. Vernon had destroyed the first one. Burned the second. Bricked up the mail slot after the third. Yesterday he'd gone nearly purple trying to tear apart the 40-odd letters that had exploded from the fireplace, and this morning, Harry could feel it in the air, that particular flavor of frantic, sweating desperation. Vernon was going to run. Harry could have stopped it. Could have plucked a letter from the air before Vernon reached it, held the man in place with a thought, torn the envelope open and read it in front of the whole family. He hadn't. Not because he was afraid, fear was something he remembered distantly, like a word in a language he'd stopped speaking, but because he was curious. Whoever was sending those letters was persistent, creative, and magical. Harry wanted to see how far they'd go. He finished his toast, washed the plate, and sat on the kitchen floor in the dark, legs crossed, palms on his knees. He closed his eyes and reached inward the way he did every morning, taking stock. The second heartbeat pulsed steady and strong. His core, he thought of it as a core because he didn't have a better word, was deeper today than yesterday, the way a well is deeper after rain. His body was slightly faster, slightly tougher. The new knowledge from the night session settled comfortably alongside everything else, ward theory, transmutation principles, and underneath it all, the enormous accumulated weight of 10 years of nightly growth. He could feel magic the way other people felt temperature. He could move things without touching them. He could make himself invisible if he concentrated, not a spell exactly, more like convincing light to go around him. He'd done it dozens of times to avoid Dudley's gang. He could heal small injuries in seconds, speak to snakes, that one had been a surprise at the zoo, sense emotions, and, though he'd only tried it once, on a day Dudley had pushed him down the stairs, release enough raw force from his body to crack a brick wall from 10 feet away. He didn't have names for most of what he could do. He knew it was magic. He'd known since he was 5, when the hum had first become loud enough to keep him awake and he'd accidentally levitated every piece of furniture in the cupboard. Petunia had screamed. Vernon had locked him in for 3 days. Neither of them had explained anything. But Harry was patient, and Harry was observant, and over the years he'd pieced together enough. Aunt Petunia's face when she thought he wasn't looking, the fear, yes, but underneath it something older and sharper. Grief. She'd known someone magical. She'd lost them. Harry's parents hadn't died in a car crash. Harry's parents had been like him. And today, someone from that world was going to come knocking. He opened his eyes, stood up, and went back to his cupboard to wait. The chaos started at 7 a.m. sharp. Vernon thundered down the stairs, Petunia trailing behind him with a suitcase, Dudley whining about missing his programs. Vernon had snapped sometime around midnight, Harry guessed. The plan, if you could call it that, was to drive. Just drive. Away from the letters, away from whatever insanity had invaded his respectable home. Harry followed them to the car without protest. He sat in the back seat next to Dudley, who took up 2/3 of the bench and smelled like stale crisps, and watched the suburbs of Little Whinging fall away through the window. They drove for hours. Vernon took random turns, doubling back, circling, muttering about, shaking them off. Petunia stared straight ahead. Dudley complained. Harry tracked their position instinctively, another gift from the system, a spatial awareness that worked like an internal compass, and estimated they were heading roughly southwest. By nightfall, Vernon had driven them to a miserable hotel on the outskirts of Cokeworth. Harry noted the name and filed it away. They checked in. Vernon and Petunia took one bed, Dudley took the other, and Harry got the floor, which was fine because he didn't need comfort to trigger the system. He just needed sleep. He closed his eyes at 10 p.m. and the hum swelled immediately, eager, like a dog that had been waiting all day for a walk. The hotel sat on dead ground, no wards, no ley lines, minimal ambient magic, so the system pulled from what it had, Harry's own reserves, cycling and refining them, compressing his core tighter and tighter like forging steel. It wasn't as productive as a night on Privet Drive with its wards and ley line, but it was still growth. Always growth. He woke at 6 a.m. feeling like he'd slept 12 hours in a featherbed. Vernon's eyes were bloodshot. He'd barely slept. Good, Harry thought. Tired people make mistakes. More driving. Then the sea. A tiny island with a shack on it, reachable only by a boat Vernon rented from a toothless old man who squinted at Dudley and said nothing. They crossed the water in a rattling dinghy under a sky the color of wet cement, and by nightfall they were inside the shack, which was exactly as horrible as it looked: one room, a fireplace, a couch with springs poking through the fabric, and a smell like salt and rotting wood. Vernon was smiling for the first time in days. "Let's see them deliver letters here," he said, with the triumph of a man who'd confused running with winning. Harry said nothing. He sat on the floor near the fireplace, drew his knees up, and tracked the hours. Dudley was asleep on the couch. Vernon and Petunia had taken the bedroom, if you could call a corner with a mattress a bedroom. Rain hammered the walls. Wind screamed through gaps in the wood. And underneath it all, Harry felt something approaching across the water. Something big, warm, and unmistakably magical. He watched the seconds tick by on Dudley's watch, which glowed faintly on his fat wrist. 11:58, 11:59. Midnight. Boom. The door didn't just open, it crashed inward off its hinges, hit the floor with a bang that shook dust from the ceiling, and through the doorway came the largest man Harry had ever seen. Twice as tall as a normal person and at least 5 times as wide, with a wild tangle of black hair and a beard that could have hidden a family of badgers. He had to duck, then squeeze, to get through the frame, and when he straightened up his head brushed the ceiling. "Sorry Abu, that," the giant said cheerfully, picking up the door and fitting it back into the frame with one hand. He turned, and his beetle-black eyes swept the room until they landed on Harry. His whole face changed. Softened. Crumpled a little. "Last time I saw you, you was only a baby," he said, his voice thick. "Yeah, look a lot like your dad, but you've got your mum's eyes." Vernon came storming out of the bedroom in his mustard-yellow nightshirt, brandishing a rifle he must have brought from home. "I demand that you leave at once," he shouted. "You are breaking and entering." The giant crossed the room in 2 strides, grabbed the barrel of the rifle, and bent it into a knot with no more effort than twisting a pipe cleaner. Vernon made a noise like a stepped-on mouse. "Dry up, Dudley, yeah, great prune," the giant said, tossing the ruined gun into a corner. He turned back to Harry and beamed. "Anyway, Harry. Happy birthday. Got summit for ya. Mighta sat on it at some point, but it'll taste all right." He pulled a slightly squashed box from inside his enormous coat and handed it over. Harry opened it. A chocolate cake with green icing that read "Happy Birthday Harry" in wobbly letters. "Thank you," Harry said, and meant it. It was the first birthday cake anyone had ever given him. The giant's eyes went shinier. "I'm Hagrid," the man said, dropping onto the couch, which groaned dangerously. "Rubius Hagrid, keeper of keys and grounds at Hogwarts. Y'all know all about Hogwarts, oh, course." "I know it's a school," Harry said calmly. "For magic." Hagrid blinked. Then he rounded on the Dursleys with a fury that made the shack walls rattle. "You told him?" "After all that fuss about, they didn't tell me anything," Harry said. "I worked it out." Hagrid's mouth opened, closed, opened again. "You worked it out?" "I've been doing magic since I was 5, Harry said. He held up his hand, and a small ball of pale light formed above his palm, steady and bright, illuminating the whole room. Dudley yelped and rolled off the couch. Vernon went white. Petunia just stared at the light like she was seeing a ghost. Hagrid looked at the light. Looked at Harry. Looked at the light again. "Blimey," he whispered. Harry let the light fade. "You were saying about Hogwarts." It took Hagrid a moment to collect himself, but he managed, and the story came out in a warm, rolling torrent. Hogwarts, the wizarding world, Harry's parents, Voldemort, the night everything changed. Some of it Harry had guessed. Some of it was new. None of it surprised him. He listened carefully, asking a question here and there, while Hagrid grew increasingly amazed that Harry was taking it all with the calm of someone reviewing a report rather than a child learning his entire life was a lie. "You're talking this well," Hagrid said finally. I've had 10 years to think about it, Harry said. Are we going tomorrow? Goin', oh, right. Diagon Alley. Get your school things. Yeah, first thing. Harry nodded, set the cake aside carefully, and lay down on the floor to sleep. Hagrid watched him with something wondering in his expression. The hum kicked in at 3:17, right on schedule, and in the magical-soaked presence of Hagrid, half-giant, Harry's system whispered, categorizing the unfamiliar magical signature, the growth was richer than it had been in weeks. Harry's body drank it in, and by morning, the lake inside him was a little bit deeper. London was loud and bright and completely mundane until Hagrid led him to a dingy pub called the Leaky Cauldron that most of the street seemed unable to see. Inside, it was dark and crowded, and every single person stopped talking when Hagrid said Harry's name. Harry felt them staring. Felt their magic, too, dozens of signatures, each one unique, most of them weak and flickering compared to the bonfire in his own chest. An old witch clutched his hand with tears in her eyes. A nervous young man in a turban, Professor Quirrell, Hagrid said, defense against the dark arts teacher, stammered a greeting and reached for a handshake. Harry took his hand. Ice shot through his fingers. Not cold exactly, more like wrongness, a signal his system fired like a warning klaxon. Something underneath Quirrell's magic, buried deep, a second signature that was dark and corroded and hungry. Harry's eyes locked onto Quirrell's, and for a fraction of a second, the stammering dropped and something ancient and sharp looked back at him through the man's pale gaze. Then Quirrell pulled his hand away, and the mask slid back into place. "Vivi very pleased to meet you, P. Potter." "Likewise," Harry said, his voice perfectly even, his system already cataloging and analyzing that dark signature, filing it away for later study. He didn't look back as Hagrid steered him toward the back of the pub, but he tracked Quirrell's position by feel until they stepped through the brick wall and into Diagon Alley. And that finally made Harry pause. Not because it was magical. He'd felt magic every day of his life. But because it was people. Hundreds of witches and wizards, crammed into a cobblestone street lined with shops that sold things Harry had only imagined, cauldrons, broomsticks, spell books, owls, robes, wands. Magic wasn't a secret here. It was everywhere, casual, normal, as mundane as electricity. A woman charmed her shopping bags to float behind her. A child pressed his nose against a window displaying a racing broom. Goblins the size of children walked among humans without anyone blinking. This was the world his parents had belonged to. The world he'd been kept from. Harry breathed in and let it go. Right then, Hagrid said. Gringotts first. Bank. Run by goblins. You'll need money for your school things. Gringotts was a white marble building at the end of the alley, staffed by goblins who looked at every human with the patient contempt of creatures who counted gold while empires rose and fell. One of them, a sharp-faced teller called Griphook, led them to a cart that plummeted through underground tunnels at a speed that made Hagrid turn green. Harry's vault, his parents' vault, held mountains of gold, silver, and bronze. He stared at it and felt nothing except a quiet resolve. Money was a tool. He filled his bag and left. After Gringotts, the shopping went quickly. Hagrid was good company, warm, earnest, terrible at keeping secrets. Harry filed away every piece of accidental information the man dropped, Dumbledore's name spoken with reverence, Hogwarts' 4 houses, the fact that Hagrid had been expelled in his 3rd year and still carried the pieces of his wand in a pink umbrella he thought nobody knew about. Harry knew. He could feel the broken magic from 3 feet away. They bought robes at Madame Malkin's, where a pale, pointed boy with slick-back blonde hair talked at Harry about Quidditch and houses and bloodlines while a witch pinned up his hems. The boy carried himself like money was a personality trait. Harry listened politely, said little, and noticed the boy's father waiting outside, tall, cold-eyed, with a magical signature that reeked of something stored and suppressed. Dark magic, but old. Not active. A stain, not a wound. "I'll see you at Hogwarts," the blonde boy said with a confidence that assumed Harry would be grateful for the connection. "Maybe," Harry said. Books at Flourish and Blots. Potions ingredients at the apothecary, where Harry's system hummed with interest at the ambient magic radiating from the rarer materials: unicorn hair, dragon heartstring, phoenix feather, all of them resonating at frequencies his body wanted to absorb. He lingered longer than necessary, letting his system feed. Then Hagrid said the word Harry had been waiting all day to hear. "Still need your wand." Ollivander's was narrow and dusty and packed floor to ceiling with thin boxes stacked on shelves that stretched back into shadow. The air was thick with layered magic, thousands of wands, each one a unique signature, all of them vibrating at slightly different frequencies. Harry's system went into overdrive the moment he crossed the threshold. He felt it surge behind his ribs, tasting the air, cataloging, hungry. A soft voice came from the back of the shop. "I wondered when I'd be seeing you, Mr. Potter." Garrick Ollivander emerged from the stacks like a ghost, pale, silver-eyed, ancient in a way that had nothing to do with age. He moved with the careful precision of someone who handled volatile things daily. "Your mother favored willow. 10¼ inches. Swishy. Excellent for charm work." He paused, studying Harry with eyes that saw more than they should. "Your father, mahogany. 11 inches. Pliable. A little more power. And the wand that gave me this?" Harry touched his scar. Ollivander's expression flickered, surprise, then something like respect. "You. 13½ inches. Phoenix feather core. I sold that wand 40 years ago, and I remember every wand I've ever sold, Mr. Potter. Every single one." He produced a tape measure that began measuring Harry on its own, arm length, finger span, the distance between his nostrils for some reason, while Ollivander disappeared into the stacks and returned with boxes. "Try this. Beechwood and dragon heartstring. 9 inches. Harry took it. The wand felt dead in his hand, not wrong, just empty. He gave it a wave. Nothing happened. Ollivander plucked it away before Harry had fully lowered his arm. "No, no. Maple and phoenix feather. 7 inches. Dead again." Harry barely touched it before Ollivander snatched it back, muttering. "Ebony and unicorn hair. Quite springy. Nothing." They went through a dozen wands in rapid succession. Then 2 dozen. Then 3. Ollivander wasn't frustrated, he was getting excited, his silver eyes gleaming brighter with every failure, pulling boxes from higher and deeper shelves, muttering to himself about combinations and core resonances. Harry's system was doing something odd. Every wand he touched, even the ones that didn't choose him, his magic brushed against the core and read it, learned its resonance, its properties, its feel. He was absorbing wand lore by contact, each failed match teaching him something new. "Tricky customer," Ollivander murmured, but he was smiling. "I wonder, yes, why not, unusual combination." He retreated deep into the shop and returned with a box that looked older than the others, its cardboard faded and its edges soft. He opened it with something close to reverence. "Holly and phoenix feather. 11 inches. Nice and supple." Harry took the wand. Every candle in the shop flared white. The surge hit him like a wave, not from the wand but from his core, rising to meet the wand's magic like 2 rivers crashing together. Gold and red sparks erupted from the tip in a fountain that reached the ceiling, and the shelves rattled, and boxes shook, and Ollivander stepped back with wide eyes as the entire shop trembled with resonance. But Harry's system wasn't done. It seized the connection and pulled. The wand's magic flowed into Harry, and Harry's magic flowed into the wand, and for 3 breathless seconds the boundary between them dissolved entirely. Every other wand in the shop responded, thousands of them, humming in their boxes, vibrating in sympathy, the whole building singing like a struck bell. Ollivander grabbed a shelf for balance. His tape measure fell from the air. Dust rained from the ceiling. Then it settled. The light dimmed. The humming faded. Harry stood in the middle of the shop holding a holly wand that felt like an extension of his own arm, and the air around him shimmered faintly, like heat haze. "Oh my," Ollivander whispered. He wasn't smiling anymore. He looked shaken in a way Harry suspected was extremely rare for a man who'd spent his life around volatile magic. "The phoenix whose tail feather is in your wand," Ollivander said slowly, "gave another feather, just one other. It is curious that you should be destined for this wand when its brother gave you that scar." Harry looked at the wand in his hand. It pulsed warmly, synchronized perfectly with his second heartbeat. "I think," Ollivander said, and his voice was barely above a breath, "we must expect great things from you, Mr. Potter. After all, he who must not be named did great things." "Terrible, yes, but great." Harry met those silver eyes steadily. "I'm not him." "No," Ollivander said. "No, I don't believe you are." He paused, and something complicated moved behind his expression. "What you just did, the resonance cascade, I've never seen that. Not in 70 years of wand making. That wand didn't just choose you, Mr. Potter. It bonded to you. There's a difference, and I'm not entirely sure I can explain what it means." "I think I can," Harry said quietly, pocketing the wand. "How much?" 7 galleons, Ollivander said, almost absently, still staring at the spot where the cascade had happened. Harry paid and left. Outside, Hagrid was waiting with something large and feathery in a cage, a snowy owl with amber eyes that fixed on Harry immediately. "Happy birthday," Hagrid said, looking pleased with himself. The owl hooted softly. Harry reached through the bars and stroked her feathers, and she leaned into his touch. He felt her, small, warm, alive, a heartbeat against his fingers. "Hedwig," he said, the name arriving from nowhere and everywhere, and the owl hooted again like she'd been waiting to hear it. The morning of September 1st came wrapped in grey clouds and a buzz of energy Harry felt from the moment he opened his eyes. The system had been generous overnight, Privet Drive's wards, fed by months of proximity, had been a steady diet all summer, and Harry could feel the difference in his bones. He was stronger today than he'd been any day of his life. He'd be stronger still tomorrow. He dressed, packed his trunk, and carried it downstairs without effort despite its weight. Vernon sat at the kitchen table, pretending to read the paper, refusing to look at him. Petunia stood at the sink, washing a dish that was already clean. "I need a ride to King's Cross," Harry said. "Fine," Vernon grunted. The man hadn't raised his voice to Harry once since the morning after Diagon Alley, when Harry had casually levitated the kitchen table to make a point. Sometimes you didn't need to have a conversation. You just needed to move a table. The drive was silent. Vernon pulled up to King's Cross station with the engine still running, which was his way of saying get out quickly. Harry pulled his trunk from the boot, set Hedwig's cage on top, and leaned down to Vernon's window. "I'll be back next summer," he said. "Make sure the cupboard's empty. I'm going to want a proper room." Vernon's face went through several colors before settling on a mottled white. He pulled away without a word. King's Cross was packed with commuters. Harry pushed his trolley through the crowds, following the ticket Hagrid had given him. Platform 9 3/4. Between platforms 9 and 10. He stood in front of the barrier between the two platforms and felt it immediately, a thin membrane of magic, cleverly layered, practically invisible unless you knew what you were looking for. Or unless you were Harry. He walked through it like stepping through a curtain. The Hogwarts Express was a scarlet steam engine pouring white smoke into the air of a platform packed with wizarding families. Children in robes, parents fussing, owls screeching, trunks clattering, chaos, but the warm kind, the kind that comes from people who belong somewhere. Harry loaded his trunk onto the train and found a compartment near the back. He stowed his things, let Hedwig out of her cage to perch on the luggage rack, and sat by the window watching the platform fill. His system hummed low and steady, content, processing the dozens of new magical signatures flooding its awareness. Students, parents, the train itself, everything here was drenched in magic, and Harry's body drank it like water. The compartment door slid open. Anyone sitting here? A tall, gangly boy with red hair and a smudge of dirt on his nose stood in the doorway, looking hopeful. Everywhere else is full. All yours, Harry said. The boy dragged in a battered trunk, shoved it under the seat, and dropped onto the bench across from Harry with the relieved sigh of someone who'd been running. I'm Ron, he said. Ron Weasley. Harry Potter. Ron's ears went red. His eyes flicked to Harry's forehead, found the scar, and went wide. Are you really? I mean, sorry, my mum told me you'd be starting this year but I didn't think, blimey. Harry waited. This was the part where people got weird. The part where they stared at the scar and forgot there was a person underneath it. He'd seen it at the Leaky Cauldron, at Diagon Alley, the way the name flipped a switch in people's brains and turned him from a boy into a symbol. But Ron surprised him. After a few seconds of gaping, the redness in his ears spread to his cheeks, and he laughed, a genuine, slightly embarrassed laugh. Sorry. That was mad. You probably get that all the time. First day, actually, Harry said. But I'm guessing it'll get old fast. Oh, it will. My brothers say the whole school's been talking about you since the letters went out. Ron leaned forward conspiratorially. Fred and George, those are my brothers, they're twins, absolute menaces, they've got a bet going on what house you'll be in. Fred says Gryffindor. George says you'll break the Sorting Hat. Harry grinned. He couldn't help it. There was something about Ron Weasley, the easy humor, the lack of pretense, the way he talked to Harry like he was just another kid on a train. What do you think? I think Fred's usually right, but I'm hoping George is, because that'd be way more interesting. Ron dug around in his pockets and produced a squashed sandwich. Want some? It's corned beef. Mom made about 40 of them. I'm good. But thanks. The train lurched and began to move. Platform 9 3/4 slid past the window, waving parents, running children, a woman who looked like an older, rounder version of Ron shouting something after the train. Ron waved back through the glass. Big family? Harry asked. Massive. 6 brothers and a sister. I'm the second youngest, which basically means everything I own is second-hand and nobody's particularly impressed by anything I do. He said it lightly, but Harry heard the edge underneath. My relatives locked me in a cupboard for 10 years, Harry said. You're already doing better than me. Ron stared at him. They what? Cupboard under the stairs. That was my room. That's mental. That's actually insane. Why would anyone? Ron's ears had gone red again, but from anger this time. You're Harry Potter. Even if you weren't, you can't just shove a kid in a cupboard. You'd be surprised what people can justify when they're scared, Harry said. Something in his tone made Ron pause. Study him. For a kid who seemed all surface, Ron Weasley had sharp eyes. You're not what I expected, he said. What did you expect? Dunno. Someone more, lost? All the stories make you sound like this tiny baby who survived by accident and got raised by muggles who didn't know anything. But you don't seem lost at all. I'm not, Harry said simply. The countryside blurred past outside. Green fields, stone walls, sheep that didn't know they were in a different world than the one on the other side of the barrier. A witch with a trolley came by selling sweets Harry had never seen, chocolate frogs, Bertie Bott's every flavor beans, pumpkin pasties, and Harry bought a pile of everything, dumping it on the seat between them. I said I was fine with the sandwich, Ron protested, even as his hand crept toward a chocolate frog. Take it. I've got a decade of birthdays to make up for. Ron laughed and took the frog, and something warm settled in Harry's chest that had nothing to do with magic. This was new. This was a boy his age who laughed at his jokes and got angry on his behalf and didn't look at him like a scar with legs. This was what other people called a friend. The system hummed its approval, or maybe Harry was projecting. The compartment door opened again. A round-faced boy with a toad-shaped panic in his eyes stuck his head in. "Have you seen a toad?" "I've lost mine, his name's Trevor, Gran's going to kill me, what's he look like?" Harry asked. "Green, warty, about this big," the boy held his hands apart. Harry closed his eyes, reached out with his senses, and found the toad's faint biological signature 3 compartments down, hiding under a seat. "Compartment 6, he said. "Under the left side bench, toward the window." The boy stared. "How do you, lucky guess?" "Go on." The boy, Neville, he said his name was, disappeared down the corridor. Ron was watching Harry with a chocolate frog halfway to his mouth. "That wasn't a guess," Ron said. "No. How'd you do that?" "I can feel things. Living things. Magic." Harry shrugged. "I can't really explain it." Ron put the frog down. "What else can you do?" Before Harry could answer, the door opened again, and this time it was a girl with bushy brown hair and an expression that suggested she'd memorized the train schedule and was concerned they were running 4 seconds behind. She was already wearing her Hogwarts robes. "Has anyone seen a toad?" "A boy named Neville's lost one." "Found it already," Ron said. Harry here's apparently psychic. The girl's attention snapped to Harry with the focus of a searchlight. "You're Harry Potter. I've read about you in Rise and Fall of the Dark Arts and Great Wizarding Events of the 20th Century and Modern Magical History," Harry finished. "I read them too." She blinked. Then she smiled, a real smile, the first one he'd seen that wasn't odd or nervous or calculated. "I'm Hermione Granger. I'm Muggle-born, and I've been practicing all the spells in our textbooks. I've managed most of them, actually." "Most?" Harry raised an eyebrow. "Well, all of them," she admitted, with a competitive flicker in her eyes that Harry found instantly likable. "Show me one." Hermione's spine straightened. She pulled out her wand, pointed it at Ron's chocolate frog, which was trying to escape, and said crisply, "Immobulus." The frog froze mid-hop. "Clean execution, good control." Harry's system catalogued the spell's signature automatically. "Not bad," Harry said. He drew his own wand, pointed it at the frozen frog, and murmured, "Wingardium Leviosa." The frog rose into the air. So did every sweet on the bench. So did Ron's sandwich. So did Ron, who yelped as he floated 6 inches off his seat, legs dangling. Harry held it for 3 seconds, everything suspended, weightless, perfectly controlled, and then set it all gently back down. Ron landed with a bounce. The sweet settled into a neat pile. The frog resumed trying to escape. The compartment was very quiet. "We haven't even started school yet," Hermione whispered. "I know," Harry said. Ron grabbed the bench like he was afraid of floating again, then burst out laughing. "George wins the bet. You're absolutely going to break the Sorting Hat." Hermione sat down without being invited, which Harry took as a compliment. For the next hour, the 3 of them talked, about Hogwarts, about houses, about what they were expecting and hoping for. Ron wanted Gryffindor because his whole family had been. Hermione wanted anywhere that valued learning, which she said diplomatically while clearly meaning Ravenclaw. Harry didn't care about houses. He cared about what the school could teach him, and more importantly, what the castle's magic would do to his system. Because he'd felt it from Hagrid's description, and he could feel it now, faintly, as the train carried them north, Hogwarts was one of the most magical places on Earth. 1,000 years of accumulated enchantment, layered wards, ambient power soaked into every stone. His system was going to feast. The sun dropped. The train slowed. Students changed into robes, and the chatter in the corridors rose in pitch and excitement. Harry stood, stretched, and felt his second heartbeat pulse strong and steady. Outside the window, in the distance, he caught his first glimpse of the castle, turrets and towers against the darkening sky, lit from within by 1,000 windows, radiating magic so dense and rich that Harry's breath caught despite himself. Hogwarts was calling him. His system answered. And somewhere deep in the castle, something very old stirred in its sleep, felt the approaching presence of a boy whose magic burned brighter than any student who'd passed through its gates in 1,000 years, and began, slowly, curiously, to wake up. Chapter 2, Sorted into Thunder. The boats were small, wooden, and enchanted to move on their own, which Harry appreciated because Hagrid alone probably would have sunk one. The half-giant stood at the front of the fleet like a lighthouse, lantern held high, bellowing instructions that mostly amounted to, "Don't fall in." Harry shared a boat with Ron, Hermione, and Neville, who had recovered Trevor the Toad and was clutching him with the white-knuckled intensity of someone who'd been given a second chance he didn't trust. The lake was black glass beneath them. Harry's senses reached down into the water and found it teeming, not just with fish and plants but with old magic, layered deep into the lake bed like geological strata. Protective enchantments. Containment wards. And something alive down there, something enormous, its magical signature slow and vast like a sleeping mountain. Giant squid, his system guessed, cross-referencing Hagrid's earlier comments. Harry let it be. Then the boats rounded a cliff face, and Hogwarts filled the sky. Every first-year gasped. Harry understood why. The castle wasn't just big, it was present, the way a thunderstorm is present, the way a bonfire is present when you're standing close enough to feel the heat on your face. Magic poured off it in waves, visible to Harry as a faint shimmer in the air, a heat haze glow that wrapped the towers and battlements like a second skin. His system surged so hard his fingers tingled. The lake of his core rippled, and he felt the first drops of Hogwarts' ambient power begin to seep in through his skin. This was going to be extraordinary. Ron was saying something about his brother Charlie and dragons, but Harry barely heard him. He was mapping the castle's magical architecture by feel, the wards layered like an onion, dozens of them, some defensive, some structural, some so old they'd fused with the stone itself. The founders had built well. Others had added to their work over centuries. And underneath it all, woven through the bedrock, was something that wasn't a ward at all. Something that felt almost like a heartbeat. The castle was alive. Not metaphorically. Not in the way people said old houses had character. Hogwarts had a pulse, and Harry could feel it sinking with his own. The boats bumped against a stone dock. They climbed out and followed Hagrid up a flight of carved steps to a massive oak door. Hagrid knocked 3 times, and the door swung open to reveal a tall, severe-looking witch in emerald robes whose expression suggested she'd never found anything funny in her life. "The Fur's years, Professor McGonagall," Hagrid said. "Thank you, Hagrid. I will take them from here." Professor McGonagall led them into an entrance hall larger than the Dursleys' entire house, lit by torches that burned without smoke, across a flagstone floor worn smooth by centuries of footsteps. Harry felt every torch, every enchanted suit of armor lining the walls, every ghost that drifted through the upper corridors. The castle was dense with magic, saturated, and his system was drinking it in with the desperate enthusiasm of a man finding water in a desert. McGonagall parked them in a small chamber off the main hall and gave a speech about houses, points, and the sorting ceremony. Harry listened with one ear while his system processed the flood of new input. Hermione was muttering spells under her breath like a pre-exam ritual. Ron looked vaguely ill. Neville looked worse. The pale, pointed boy from Madame Malkin's appeared at Harry's elbow. "So it's true," Draco Malfoy said, flanked by 2 large boys who seemed to function primarily as furniture. "Harry Potter's come to Hogwarts." Murmurs rippled through the first years. Harry turned to face him. "You'll find some wizarding families are better than others, Potter," Malfoy said, extending a hand. You don't want to go making friends with the wrong sort. I can help you there. His eyes flicked to Ron with undisguised contempt. Ron's ears went red. Harry looked at the offered hand, then back at Malfoy's face. The boy's magic was average, competent bloodline, decent reserves, nothing remarkable. His confidence came from his name, not his ability. But there was something underneath the arrogance, something sharp and watching, and Harry filed that away because underestimating people was a habit he refused to develop. I appreciate the offer, Harry said, his voice carrying clearly enough for every first year to hear. But I've been picking my own friends since before I knew what a wizard was, and I haven't gotten it wrong yet. Malfoy's hand hung in the air. His cheeks flushed pink. The two large boys, Crabbe and Goyle, Harry's ears caught from earlier whispers, shifted like dogs waiting for a command. You'll regret that, Potter, Malfoy said quietly. I really won't. McGonagall returned before it could escalate and led them through a set of double doors into the Great Hall. For long tables stretched the length of the room, packed with students, lit by thousands of candles floating in midair beneath a ceiling enchanted to mirror the sky outside, tonight, a scatter of stars across deep blue-black. At the far end, a high table seated the professors. Harry scanned them automatically. Hagrid, settling into an oversized chair. A tiny wizard who must be Flitwick. A stern woman with a monocle. A man who looked like he'd been buried and dug back up, and there, at the center, an old man with a silver beard that reached his belt, half-moon spectacles, and a magical signature that hit Harry like a wall of warm light. Albus Dumbledore. Harry studied him carefully. The headmaster's power was immense, deeper and more refined than anything Harry had encountered, layered with decades of experience and discipline. But immense wasn't infinite. Harry's system measured, compared, and delivered its verdict with quiet certainty. Dumbledore was the strongest wizard in this room. Harry was second. The gap was closing. One more year, maybe two, and it wouldn't be a gap at all. Then Harry felt the other one. Sitting at the far end of the staff table, dressed in black, watching the incoming students with an expression of active distaste, a man with greasy black hair, a hooked nose, and a magical signature wound so tight with control it practically vibrated. Severus Snape. Their eyes met across the hall, and Harry felt a flicker of something, not hostility exactly, more like recognition. Snape's dark gaze locked onto Harry's face, moved to the scar, then dropped to his eyes. Something shifted in the man's expression. Something cracked, just for an instant, before the mask of cold contempt slammed back down. He knew my mother, Harry thought. The eyes. Everyone says I have her eyes. McGonagall placed a stool at the front of the hall and set an old, patched, battered hat on top of it. The hat twitched, a rip near the brim opened wide, and it began to sing. Harry listened to the song, a rundown of the four houses, their values, their founders, while his system did something unexpected. It reached toward the hat. Felt its magic. And recoiled slightly, not in pain but in surprise, because the sorting hat wasn't just enchanted. It was sentient. A genuine magical intelligence, ancient and complex, its mind-reading capabilities woven into its fabric at a level that made legilimency look like a party trick. The song ended. The hall applauded. McGonagall unrolled a scroll. When I call your name, you will put on the hat and sit on the stool to be sorted. Abbott, Hannah. A pink-faced girl stumbled forward, jammed the hat on her head, and after a moment it shouted, Hufflepuff. The table on the right erupted in cheers. One by one, names were called. Bones, Susan. Boot, Terry. Brocklehurst, Mandy. Granger, Hermione. Hermione practically ran to the stool. The hat barely touched her head before shouting, Gryffindor. She looked slightly surprised, she'd wanted Ravenclaw, Harry knew, but pleased. Ron groaned softly. Great, we'll never hear the end of it. Longbottom, Neville. Neville tripped on the way up, sat on the hat instead of under it, turned scarlet, corrected himself, and waited an agonizingly long minute before the hat called Gryffindor. He ran off still wearing it and had to jog back to return it amid laughter. Malfoy, Draco. The hat had barely grazed his blonde hair. Slytherin. Malfoy swaggered to the green and silver table looking like Christmas had come early. More names. More sortings. The hall buzzed with anticipation that grew louder with every name that wasn't Potter. Harry felt the collective attention building like static electricity, hundreds of eyes sneaking glances at the dwindling group of unsorted first years, trying to spot the scar. Potter, Harry. The hall went silent. Not quiet, silent, the way a room goes silent when the air itself holds its breath. Then the whispers started, frantic and overlapping. Potter, did she say? The Harry Potter? Harry walked to the stool. He didn't hurry. He didn't hesitate. He sat down, and McGonagall lowered the hat onto his head, and the great hall vanished. Darkness. Then a voice, old, dry, amused, speaking directly into his mind. Well, well, well. What do we have here? Harry felt the hat's consciousness brush against his, a gentle probe seeking entry. He didn't resist. He had nothing to hide. The hat went quiet. For a long time, there was nothing. Harry sat on the stool in the dark behind his eyelids, and the sorting hat was silent in a way that felt less like consideration and more like shock. I've been sorting students for 1,000 years, the hat said finally, and its voice had changed, the dry amusement replaced by something raw and wondering. I've sat on the heads of geniuses, prodigies, future ministers, and future Dark Lords. I sorted Tom Riddle. I sorted Albus Dumbledore. A pause. I have never felt anything like you. Harry said nothing. He let the hat look. Your mind is extraordinary. Not in its structure, you think like a child, which you are, but in its depth. There are layers here that shouldn't exist in someone your age. Knowledge you didn't learn. Instincts you didn't develop. And your core, the hat's presence shuddered. What happened to you? Something broke when I was a baby, Harry thought. And it's been repairing itself ever since. Growing. Growing. Yes. That's one word for it. Evolving might be more accurate. Your magic isn't static, Mr. Potter. It's alive in a way I've only seen theorized in texts the founders themselves wrote. Texts I was there for. A long, considering silence. You're going to change everything, aren't you? Probably. Where are you putting me? That's the question. The hat chuckled, but there was weight behind it. You have courage that isn't performed, it's structural, built into your bones. That's Gryffindor. You have a mind that devours knowledge automatically, literally, which is either the most Ravenclaw thing I've ever encountered or the most terrifying. You have loyalty so deep it hasn't been tested yet because you haven't had anyone to be loyal to, but when you do, heaven help whoever threatens them, Hufflepuff would kill for that. And ambition. The hat paused. You don't want power for its own sake. But you will not be controlled, contained, or diminished. Slytherin would understand you. I don't care about houses, Harry said. Put me where I'll do the most good. Good. Not where you'll be most powerful, or most celebrated, or most comfortable. Where you'll do the most good. The hat's voice softened. Helga Hufflepuff would have wept to hear that. Salazar Slytherin would have called you naive. Rowena Ravenclaw would have asked you to define good. But Godric Gryffindor, Godric would have grinned and handed you a sword. Harry felt the hat's decision crystallize. I'm going to tell you something I've never told a student, Mr. Potter. The castle felt you coming. The moment you crossed the lake, the wards lit up in ways I haven't seen since the founders walked these halls. Hogwarts wants you here. Not in a specific house, here. In its walls. In its magic. Be careful with that. Old magic plays long games. I'll keep that in mind. I'm sure you will. Good luck, Harry Potter. You're going to need it, or rather, everyone else is going to need it around you. The hat's brim opened wide, and its voice rang through the silent hall, Gryffindor. The Gryffindor table exploded. Fred and George Weasley were standing on the bench chanting, "We got Potter. We got Potter." Hermione was clapping with both hands. Ron was grinning ear to ear. The rest of the hall buzzed. Slytherin looked sour, Ravenclaw looked thoughtful, Hufflepuff applauded politely. Harry pulled off the hat and handed it back to McGonagall. As he did, his fingers brushed hers, and he felt the woman's magic flare with surprise. She'd felt something, a resonance, a charge, the sheer density of what lived inside him transmitted through a moment of skin contact. Her eyes widened slightly, but she was too professional to react beyond that. Harry walked to the Gryffindor table and sat next to Ron. "Longest sorting in 20 years, Ron whispered. "What did the hat say to you?" "That I'm going to change everything," Harry said. Ron blinked. Was it joking? No. Wicked. Dumbledore stood and gave a short, cheerfully bizarre speech. Nitwit, blubber, oddment, tweak, and food appeared on every plate in the hall, mountains of it, roasts and pies and potatoes and things Harry had never been allowed to eat at the Dursleys. He filled his plate and ate properly for maybe the third time in his life, and the food was extraordinary, but what was more extraordinary was the magic in it. House elf preparation, his system whispered, every dish laced with minor warming charms, preservation enchantments, nutrition stabilizers. The elves cooked with magic the way other people cooked with salt. Harry's system absorbed every trace. The feast lasted 2 hours. Harry met the Gryffindor ghost, nearly headless Nick, whose spectral magic was fascinating in its fragility. He met Percy Weasley, Ron's older brother, a prefect who shook Harry's hand with the gravity of a diplomat. He watched the staff table and noticed Quirrell avoiding his gaze, Snape glaring with that peculiar cracked intensity, and Dumbledore studying him over half-moon spectacles with an expression Harry couldn't quite parse, warmth, calculation, concern, all layered together like the castle's own wards. After dinner, Percy led the Gryffindor first-years up 7 flights of stairs that moved while you were standing on them, through corridors guarded by suits of armor and lined with paintings that talked and gestured, and in one case through fruit. The fat lady, a large woman in a pink dress inside a portrait, guarded the entrance to Gryffindor Tower. "Password?" she asked. "Caput Draconis," Percy said, and the portrait swung open to reveal a round, cozy common room decked in red and gold, with a fireplace that crackled with enchanted flames and squashy armchairs that practically begged you to fall asleep in them. The dormitory was at the top of a spiral staircase, a round room with 5 four-poster beds hung with deep red curtains. Ron claimed the bed next to Harry's. Neville, Dean Thomas, and Seamus Finnegan took the others. They talked for a while, excited, nervous, speculating about tomorrow's classes, and one by one they dropped off to sleep. Harry lay in his 4-poster bed, curtains drawn, and let himself feel. Hogwarts was everywhere. The castle's magic didn't just surround him, it permeated him, sank into his pores, resonated with his core at a frequency that made his bones hum. The wards were 10 times denser than privet drives. The ley lines running beneath the castle were rivers compared to the creek under his aunt's house. And that underlying pulse, the castle's own heartbeat, was syncing with his, beat by beat, pulling closer. His system activated. Not at 3:17. At 11:02, barely an hour after he'd closed his eyes. The surge hit him harder than it ever had, white gold fire behind his eyelids, his core expanding like a balloon, magic flooding in from every direction. The castle was feeding him. Not passively, not as ambient runoff, but actively, the way a mother's magic feeds an unborn child in the womb. Hogwarts recognized his system and was pouring itself into it. Harry's hands gripped the sheets. His jaw clenched. The growth was enormous, more in a single hour than he'd gained in a month at Privet Drive. His core didn't just deepen, it restructured, new channels forming, new capacities opening up, his magical reserves expanding into territory he hadn't known existed. Knowledge flooded in alongside power, ancient ward schemas, structural enchantment theory, 1,000 years of magical residue from every spell ever cast within these walls. The other boys slept peacefully. The enchantments on the beds were designed to ensure that. Harry's magic surged and grew in silence, invisible, relentless. By 3:17, when the normal cycle kicked in on top of the castle's feeding, Harry was so far beyond where he'd been at dinner that the comparison was absurd. He felt the change in his body, denser, faster, sharper, and in his mind, where new understandings sat like books he'd always owned but never opened. He knew things now. Not everything, not even close, but the foundations were there: transfiguration theory, charm mechanics, ward architecture, potion interactions, the deep grammar of magic itself. He opened his eyes in the dark and stared at the canopy of his bed. "Okay," he whispered. That was new. He flexed his hand. A globe of light appeared above his palm, not the pale, tentative thing he'd shown Hagrid in the shack, but a steady, brilliant sphere that lit the room like daylight. He extinguished it immediately, but not before seeing his own shadow thrown sharp and black against the curtains. Harry rolled over and went back to sleep, and the system kept working, and the castle kept feeding, and by morning the gap between Harry Potter and every professor in the building had narrowed by half. Breakfast was kippers, toast, eggs, and a schedule that made Ron groan. Double potions with the Slytherins on Friday? Someone hates us already. Hermione, who'd appeared at the table with her bag packed and her hair even bushier than the night before, was studying the timetable with the focus of a general reviewing battle plans. Transfiguration first. With McGonagall. That should be fascinating. That's one word for it, Ron muttered. Harry ate his toast and felt the castle hum around him. Overnight, something had shifted in his relationship with Hogwarts. The building was aware of him now, in the way a dog is aware of its owner. Doors opened a fraction of a second before he reached them. Staircases steadied when he stepped on them. A suit of armor on the third floor had saluted as he passed, which Hermione said she'd never read about happening. McGonagall's classroom was on the first floor, lined with windows that let in the grey Scottish morning and furnished with desks arranged in neat rows. The professor stood at the front in her emerald robes, her expression set to its default severity. Transfiguration is some of the most complex and dangerous magic you will learn at Hogwarts, she began, her voice clipped and precise. Anyone messing about in my class will leave and not come back. You have been warned. She turned her desk into a pig and back again, which impressed everyone and made Harry's system immediately begin deconstructing the spell, the intent, the visualization, the power curve, the molecular restructuring that underpinned the magical transformation. By the time McGonagall finished her lecture and handed out matchsticks with instructions to turn them into needles, Harry understood the theory at a level she probably hadn't expected to teach until 5th year. He picked up his match, held it between 2 fingers, and didn't bother with the incantation. He just thought at it, silver, pointed, sharp, metal, and the match became a needle. Perfect, gleaming, with a tiny eye at one end and a point at the other that caught the light. The transformation happened silently. No flash, no spark. One moment it was wood, the next it was steel. Hermione, who'd been concentrating furiously on her own match, looked over and froze. Her match had gone slightly silver at the tip, ahead of everyone else in the class, but Harry's was done. Completely, flawlessly done. McGonagall noticed the silence from Harry's corner of the room and walked over. She picked up the needle, examined it, held it to the light, tested the point against her finger. She set it down. "Mr. Potter," she said, and her voice was very carefully controlled. "Have you studied transfiguration before?" "No, Professor." "You performed a silent, wandless transformation on your first attempt." "Yes, Professor." The classroom was dead quiet. Every student was watching. McGonagall's lips pressed into a thin line, not anger, Harry judged, but the expression of a woman rapidly recalibrating her understanding of reality. "Do it again," she said. "With the wand this time. I want to see the magical signature." Harry drew his holly wand, pointed it at the needle, turned it back into a match, and then back into a needle with a casual flick. The wand sang in his hand, it loved being used, loved the flow of his magic through its core. The transformation was, if anything, even cleaner the second time. McGonagall stared at the needle. Then she looked at Harry, and for the first time, the severity cracked. Not into warmth, into something more complicated. Awe, recognition, and a flicker of something that might have been fear, quickly suppressed. 5 points to Gryffindor, she said briskly, returning to the front of the class. "The rest of you, back to work." But Harry caught the way she glanced at him twice more during the lesson, and he felt the subtle pulse of magic she sent out toward the headmaster's office, a communication spell, quick and discreet. She was reporting him. He didn't mind. Let them watch. Charms was next, taught by Professor Flitwick, a tiny man who stood on a stack of books to see over his desk and who toppled off said books when he reached Harry's name on the roll call. He was delightful, enthusiastic, encouraging, genuinely passionate about his subject in a way that made the room brighter. Now, the levitation charm. Swish and flick, everyone, swish and flick. The incantation is Wingardium Leviosa, and do mind the pronunciation, or you'll end up like poor wizard Baraffio, who said S instead of F and found himself with a buffalo on his chest. The class practiced on feathers. Ron couldn't get his to budge. Hermione's floated perfectly on her third try, earning a squeak of delight from Flitwick. Seamus set his on fire. Harry looked at his feather, pointed his wand, and said, Wingardium Leviosa. Every feather in the room rose simultaneously. 32 feathers, lifting off 32 desks, rising in perfect synchronized formation to hover at exactly the same height. The students stared upward. Flitwick stared upward. The feathers hung motionless, casting tiny shadows on the desks below. Harry held them for a beat, then let them drift gently back down. Flitwick didn't fall off his books this time. He just stood there, one hand on his chest, his eyes wide and shining. Then he started laughing, a high, delighted laugh that filled the classroom. Magnificent, he squeaked. Absolutely magnificent. The control. The range. Mr. Potter, that was the single finest piece of first-year charm work I have ever witnessed, and I have been teaching for 37 years. Harry shrugged. It felt natural. Natural, he says. Flitwick was practically bouncing. Class, what Mr. Potter just demonstrated, the simultaneous levitation of multiple objects with a single incantation, is a technique typically reserved for NEWT students. The magical control required is, well, it's extraordinary. 10 points to Gryffindor. Hermione was staring at Harry with an expression caught between admiration and competitive fury. Ron was grinning like a lunatic. Malfoy, across the room, had gone very still, his feather sitting untouched on his desk while he watched Harry with narrowed eyes. By lunch, the whole school knew. The speed of Hogwarts gossip was, Harry reflected, genuinely impressive, a communication network that rivaled any technology the Muggle world had produced. By the time he sat down for sandwiches, he'd been stopped in 3 corridors by older students who wanted to shake his hand, stare at his scar, or in one case ask him to levitate their friend's bag as a prank. You're famous for the wrong thing, Hermione said, sliding into the seat across from him. Everyone knows about the you-know-who thing. Now they're going to know about this, and it's going to be a nightmare. Why? Because people don't like feeling inferior. You made every student in Charms look like a toddler with a crayon. Some of them are going to admire you. Most of them are going to resent you. She's not wrong, Ron said through a mouthful of ham sandwich. But for what it's worth, it was bloody brilliant. "I'm not going to pretend to be bad at things I'm good at," Harry said. "That's a waste of everyone's time, including mine." Hermione opened her mouth, closed it, and then nodded slowly. "Fair enough. But don't be surprised when the pushback starts." It started at 2 p.m., in the dungeons, in a cold stone classroom that smelled of formaldehyde and old grudges. Severus Snape swept in like a bad mood given human form, black robes billowing, doors slamming behind him, his dark eyes raking the class with undisguised disdain. He didn't introduce himself. He didn't welcome them. He launched straight into a roll call, his voice a low, silky drawl that managed to make every name sound like a minor disappointment. "Ah, yes," he said, reaching Harry's name. "Harry Potter. Our new celebrity." Malfoy sniggered from the Slytherin side. Harry met Snape's gaze and said nothing. Snape's eyes locked onto his, and Harry felt it, a pressure against his mind, subtle but unmistakable. Not a physical sensation. Mental. Snape was trying to read his thoughts. Legilimency. His system identified it instantly, pulled from knowledge absorbed through the castle's ambient magic overnight. The mind arts, legilimency in occlumency, attack and defense. Snape was a practitioner. A good one. Harry didn't block him. He let Snape in, not into the deep layers, not into the system or the core, but into the surface thoughts, the ones he chose to show. A calm, still lake. A boy sitting in a dungeon, unafraid, waiting. Snape blinked. The pressure withdrew. Something changed in the man's expression, the sneer faltered for a fraction of a second, replaced by confusion. He'd expected to find arrogance, fear, or the scattered mind of an 11-year-old. He'd found a fortress. Potter. Snape snapped, recovering. "What would I get if I added powdered root of asphodel to an infusion of wormwood?" Hermione's hand shot up. Harry didn't raise his. He answered directly. "Draught of living death. A sleeping potion so powerful it mimics death. The standard recipe requires 13 sapophoros beans, but most masters use 12 because the 13th destabilizes the shrivelfig base unless you substitute with valerian root." The dungeon went silent. Snape stared at him. The class stared at him. Hermione's hand was still up, frozen midair. "Where would you look if I told you to find me a bezoar?" Snape's voice had gone very quiet. "Stomach of a goat. It's a calcified calcium deposit that neutralizes most common poisons. Doesn't work on basilisk venom or custom-brewed toxins targeting specific magical signatures. And what is the difference between monkshood and wolfsbane? Same plant. Also called aconite. Genus Aconitum. Extremely toxic, used in the wolfsbane potion which, and I'm guessing this is relevant to you personally, Professor, allows a werewolf to retain their human mind during transformation." The silence in the dungeon could have been cut with a knife and served on toast. Harry hadn't meant the werewolf comment as an attack. It was simply information his system had parsed, Snape's particular expertise in potion making, his known association with the wolfsbane potion, the faint trace of wolf-adjacent magical residue he carried from what was clearly long-term exposure to a lycanthropic individual. Harry's system connected dots automatically. Sometimes it connected them faster than social awareness could keep up. Snape's face was white. Not angry white. Shocked white. The kind of white that comes when someone hits a nerve you didn't know was exposed. "1 point to Gryffindor," Snape said, and the words sounded like they physically hurt him. He turned away, robes swirling, and began the lesson. It was a disaster for everyone except Harry. Snape was brutal, prowling between cauldrons, criticizing technique, mocking mistakes, lavishing praise only on Malfoy, whose potion was mediocre at best. He paired Harry with Ron, clearly hoping incompetence by association would drag Harry down. Harry brewed a perfect boil-cure potion in 20 minutes. The liquid was exactly the shade of teal the textbook described, the consistency was flawless, and when Snape swept over to inspect it, his ladle came up clean. He said nothing. Didn't award points. Didn't acknowledge it. Just moved on. But Harry felt the man's eyes on his back for the rest of the lesson, and the legilimency probe came twice more, each time lighter, more careful, less an attack and more a question. What are you? Harry let the question hang unanswered. After potions, Hermione cornered him in the corridor. How did you know all that? We haven't even opened the textbook. I read ahead. No, you didn't. I read the entire first-year curriculum and half the second-year material, and the Sapophorus bean substitution isn't in any textbook I found. That's advanced potions theory. Harry considered lying. Decided against it, Hermione was too smart to fool for long, and he didn't want to fool her anyway. I learn things in my sleep, he said. Hermione waited for the punchline. It didn't come. You learn things. In your sleep. My magic trains itself while I'm unconscious. It absorbs ambient magical knowledge, spells, theory, techniques, and integrates them into my mind and body. It's been happening since I was a baby. Ron, who'd been eavesdropping, leaned against the wall. That's cheating. It's not intentional. Still cheating. Brilliant, though. Hermione's expression had gone through several phases: disbelief, analysis, fascination, and settled on hungry curiosity. That shouldn't be possible. Passive magical absorption at that scale would require the energy requirements alone, and the integration into cognitive function. Harry, do you have any idea what you're describing? Something that doesn't have a name, Harry said. Believe me, I've looked. We need to research this. The library here is supposed to be incredible. There must be historical precedents, maybe an ancient magical theory or, Hermione, Harry said gently. I've had 10 years to think about this. I'm not worried about understanding it. I'm focused on using it. She looked at him with an expression he couldn't quite read, respect, maybe, mixed with the particular frustration of someone who'd never met a problem she couldn't solve and wasn't ready to accept that this might be the first. Fine, she said. But I'm going to research it anyway. I'd be disappointed if you didn't. The first week of classes confirmed what the Sorting Hat had predicted: Harry Potter was going to change everything. By Friday, every professor had seen what he could do, and the reactions split neatly into categories. Flitwick was thrilled. He'd started giving Harry extra challenges during class, more complex charms, faster casting, creative applications, and lit up every time Harry exceeded his expectations, which was every time. The little professor had begun staying after class to chat, trading magical theory with Harry like a colleague rather than a student. Harry liked him enormously. McGonagall was impressed but cautious. She'd pushed Harry further in each transfiguration lesson: complex transformations, material conversions, animate to inanimate switches that weren't on the first-year syllabus, and Harry had handled all of them. She'd stopped saying, 5 points to Gryffindor, and started simply nodding, which Ron said was the McGonagall equivalent of a standing ovation. But there was a watchfulness to her, a tension in the way she looked at Harry when she thought he wasn't paying attention. She was reporting to Dumbledore. Harry could feel the communication spells humming through the castle's stonework after every lesson. Snape was a wound that wouldn't close. He'd abandoned the obvious hostility after the first class, not out of warmth but out of something more unsettling. He watched Harry with an intensity that went beyond dislike, beyond grudge, into territory that was almost clinical. During Friday's double potions, he set the class a second-year potion without warning, a shrinking solution that required precise timing and temperature control. Harry brewed it perfectly. Snape stood over his cauldron for a full minute, staring down at the green liquid, and then walked away without a word. After class, Harry lingered. The other students filed out. Snape was at his desk, sorting papers, pretending Harry wasn't there. "You knew my mother," Harry said. Snape's hand stopped moving. He didn't look up. I can see it when you look at me, Harry continued. You see her. My eyes. It bothers you, but not the way hating someone bothers you. It bothers you the way missing someone does. The dungeon was silent except for the bubbling of a cauldron Snape had left simmering in the corner. The man's magical signature, normally so tightly controlled, flickered. Get out of my classroom, Potter. Harry left. But he'd seen enough. The crack in Snape's armor wasn't hatred. It was grief, and it ran all the way down. The second night's growth was even more intense than the first. Harry lay in his four-poster while the castle poured magic into him like filling a vessel that had no bottom, and his system restructured, expanded, evolved. He woke at dawn feeling like he'd aged a year overnight, not physically, but magically. His awareness had sharpened. He could feel individual students in distant parts of the castle, sense the mood of the wards, hear the whisper of the castle's own consciousness brushing against his. And he could feel Quirrell. Not just the stammering professor, the thing underneath. The dark, corroded, hungry signature he'd felt in the leaky cauldron. It was stronger here, fed by proximity to the castle's magic, and it was doing something on the third floor. Every night, between 2 and 4 a.m., while Harry's system was farming and the castle was quiet, Quirrell moved to the third-floor corridor and probed at something. Defenses. Protections. A series of magical obstacles guarding something that radiated power. Harry felt all of it. The three-headed dog. The devil's snare. The enchanted keys. The chess set. The potions puzzle. And at the end, behind the last door, something that pulsed with a uniquely concentrated magical signature, ancient, alchemical, practically humming with potential. He didn't know what it was yet. But he knew Quirrell wanted it, and the thing riding Quirrell wanted it more. Saturday morning, Harry found a note on his bedside table, written in thin, slanted purple ink, Dear Harry, I wonder whether you might join me for tea this afternoon at 3 o'clock. I have a fondness for sherbet lemons, should you wish to bring the password, yours sincerely, Professor Dumbledore. Harry showed it to Ron and Hermione at breakfast. He wants to take your measure, Hermione said immediately. You've been outperforming every first-year expectation by an order of magnitude. He'd be a terrible headmaster if he didn't want to understand why. Or he just wants tea, Ron said. Not everything's a chess game, Hermione. With Dumbledore. Everything's a chess game. Harry pocketed the note. Then I'd better be good at chess. At 3 o'clock, he stood in front of the stone gargoyle guarding the headmaster's office and said, Sherbet lemon. The gargoyle leaped aside. A spiral staircase carried him upward to a wooden door, which opened before he knocked. Dumbledore's office was a circular room filled with extraordinary things, silver instruments that whirred and puffed smoke, portraits of former headmasters dozing in their frames, a phoenix perched on a golden stand near the window. The bird was magnificent, red and gold plumage, intelligent eyes, a magical signature that burned so pure and bright it made Harry's system ache with wanting. Fawkes. His system supplied the name from castle lore absorbed overnight. Dumbledore's phoenix. The source of the feather in Harry's wand, and in Voldemort's. Dumbledore sat behind a claw-footed desk, dressed in robes of deep blue, his silver beard neat, his half-moon spectacles perched on a crooked nose. He looked exactly like what he was, the most powerful wizard in Britain, and possibly the most dangerous, because his power came wrapped in kindness and eccentricity in the warm, disarming smile of everyone's favorite grandfather. Harry wasn't disarmed. Harry, my boy. Thank you for coming. Tea. Please. Dumbledore poured with the careful attention of a man who took tea seriously. The cups were delicate china painted with tiny golden snitches. The tea was excellent. I trust your first week has been eventful. Dumbledore said. Your professors have been generous with their reports, I'm sure. Dumbledore's eyes twinkled. Minerva used the words unprecedented and concerning in the same sentence, which I believe is a first. Phileas sent me a 3-page letter about your charm work. Professor Snape said nothing at all, which from Severus is practically a sonnet. Harry sipped his tea. And what do you think? I think, Dumbledore said, setting down his cup, that you are a remarkable young man who deserves honesty. So let me be honest. The twinkle dimmed. The grandfatherly warmth remained, but underneath it, Harry felt the steel. Your abilities are extraordinary. Far beyond anything a first year should possess. Several of my professors believe you may already be operating at a level comparable to their own, and given what I've observed through the castle's monitoring enchantments, I suspect they may be underestimating you. Harry said nothing. He waited. I placed you with the Dursleys for a reason, Harry. The blood protection, your mother's sacrifice, created a ward that kept you safe from Voldemort's followers for 10 years. I know it was not a happy childhood. I know they were not kind. And I am sorrier for that than you may believe. I believe you're sorry, Harry said. I also believe you'd do it again. Dumbledore looked at him for a long moment. Yes, he said quietly. I would. The protection was necessary. I'm not angry about it, Harry said, and he wasn't. Anger was an emotion he'd long since metabolized, processed, and moved past. But I want you to understand something, Professor. The cupboard, the neglect, the 10 years of being treated like a burden, I survived all of it. Not because of luck or protection or because someone was watching out for me. I survived because of what I am. And what I am isn't something you created, controlled, or planned for. The office was very quiet. Fawkes ruffled his feathers softly. The silver instrument's word. No, Dumbledore said. It is not. He studied Harry with those bright blue eyes, and Harry felt the faintest brush of legitimacy, so light it was almost polite. Harry let him see the surface. The calm. The strength. Dumbledore withdrew. May I ask what you know about your own abilities? Their source. My magic trains itself while I sleep. It absorbs ambient magical energy, knowledge, and skill, and integrates them automatically. It's been doing this since the night Voldemort tried to kill me. I believe the killing curse damaged my magical core and triggered an adaptive repair mechanism that never stopped. Every night I grow stronger. Every night the process accelerates. He said it plainly, without drama, because it was simply the truth. Dumbledore's expression didn't change, but his magical signature flared, a brief, involuntary spike of surprise that Harry caught easily. The headmaster hadn't expected Harry to understand it so clearly. He'd expected a confused child with unusual talent, not a fully aware individual who'd mapped his own magical evolution. Remarkable, Dumbledore murmured. The killing curse as a catalyst for magical evolution. I've never encountered anything like it in 200 years of literature. I don't think it's happened before. No. I don't believe it has. Dumbledore was quiet for a moment, thinking. Harry could practically see the calculations running behind those blue eyes, rearranging strategies, discarding assumptions, building new frameworks. Harry, I want to ask you something, and I want you to answer honestly. Go ahead. Are you afraid of what you're becoming? Harry set his teacup down. No. Why not? Because I didn't choose this, but I've chosen what to do with it. I'm not interested in power for its own sake. I'm not interested in control, domination, or any of the things Voldemort wanted. I want to learn. I want to protect the people who matter to me. And I want to be left alone to do both. Fawkes let out a soft, musical note, a sound like liquid gold, warm and approving. The Phoenix's eyes met Harry's, and something passed between them that Harry felt in his core, recognition. Kinship. Dumbledore noticed. His eyes widened slightly. Fawkes doesn't sing for just anyone. He knows what I am, Harry said. So do you, now. The question is what you're going to do about it. The headmaster was silent for a long time. The portraits pretended to sleep. The silver instruments whirred. I am going to trust you, Dumbledore said finally. Not because I'm certain it's wise, but because the alternative, treating you as a variable to be managed rather than a person to be respected, would be both foolish and wrong. You've earned that much in a single week. Harry stood. Thank you for the tea, Professor. Harry, one more thing. Dumbledore's voice stopped him at the door. The third-floor corridor on the right-hand side is out of bounds to all students this year. I announced this at the feast. I remember. I suspect you already know why. Harry met his eyes. Something's being guarded there. Something valuable. And someone in this castle is trying to steal it. Dumbledore's expression didn't flicker. And what do you intend to do about that? Right now? Nothing. I don't know enough yet. But when I do, I'll handle it. I would prefer, I know what you'd prefer, Professor. But I'm not the kind of person who waits for permission. Harry opened the door. Good afternoon. He left Dumbledore sitting behind his desk with a phoenix singing softly on its perch and an expression on his face that was equal parts admiration and dread. That night, Harry lay in his bed and let the castle pour itself into him. The system hummed, the magic flowed, and in the darkness of Gryffindor Tower, Harry Potter grew stronger than he'd been that morning, which had been stronger than the night before, which had been stronger than the day he'd arrived. Somewhere on the third floor, Quirrell pressed his hand against a locked door and felt the defenses resist him. Underneath his turban, something cold and ancient whispered instructions, and Quirrell obeyed, probing for weaknesses, testing for gaps. But the thing under the turban was distracted tonight. It had felt Harry's magic during the day, felt it growing, expanding, becoming something vast and terrifying. Tom Riddle had studied magical theory for 50 years, had pushed the boundaries of what was possible further than any wizard alive, and he had never encountered anything like the boy in Gryffindor Tower. The boy was farming power in his sleep. And every night, the harvest was bigger. Something needed to be done. Quickly. Before the gap became uncrossable. Voldemort whispered to his servant, and the plans accelerated. Chapter 3, The Castle Knows His Name. It started with the doors. Harry noticed it on Monday morning, walking to Transfiguration with Ron. They were running 3 minutes late because Ron had spent 5 minutes arguing with his tie, which kept trying to strangle him, a hexed hand-me-down from Fred and George, apparently, and they were taking a shortcut through the fourth-floor corridor when Harry reached for a handle and the door swung open before his fingers touched it. Ron didn't notice. He was still wrestling with the tie. But Harry paused, looked at the door, and felt the faintest pulse of magic, not from the hinges or the wood, but from the wall, from the stone itself, rippling outward from a point somewhere deep in the castle's foundation. The building had sensed him coming and opened the way. He filed it away and kept walking. It happened again after lunch. A staircase that had been mid-swing, rotating toward the wrong corridor, stopped and reversed when Harry stepped onto it. Then again in the evening, when a tapestry on the 7th floor shifted aside to reveal a passage Harry hadn't known about, a shortcut that cut 10 minutes off the walk between the library and Gryffindor Tower. He hadn't asked for it. He hadn't even been thinking about shortcuts. The castle had simply offered. By Wednesday, it was impossible to ignore. The paintings are watching you, Hermione said at breakfast, buttering her toast with the aggressive precision she brought to everything. Not just glancing, watching. The night on the 5th floor followed you for 3 corridors yesterday. And I spoke to nearly headless Nick, who says the ghosts are talking about you. Ghosts talk about everyone, Ron said. Not like this. Nick said the Bloody Baron, that's the Slytherin ghost, the one who scares everyone, asked about Harry by name. The Bloody Baron doesn't ask about anyone. He barely speaks. Harry poured himself pumpkin juice and let Hermione talk. She'd been cataloguing the anomalies with the thoroughness of a research project, which is essentially what it had become. A notebook sat beside her plate, already half full of observations in her tiny, precise handwriting. The suits of armor on the third floor salute when you pass, she continued, ticking off a finger. The trick step on the grand staircase, the one that everyone's leg sinks into, goes solid when you approach. Professor Sprout said the Whomping Willow went still for 30 seconds yesterday afternoon for no apparent reason, and I checked, you were walking past the greenhouses at exactly that time. The Whomping Willow is on the other side of the grounds, Ron said, frowning. That's got nothing to do with Harry. It has everything to do with Harry. The Willow is part of Hogwarts grounds, which means it's connected to the same ward network, the same magical infrastructure. If the castle is responding to Harry, everything tied to the castle could be responding too. She turned to Harry with the look of someone who'd built a hypothesis and was waiting for data. What's happening? Harry considered how much to share. He'd been thinking about it all week, the way the castle bent around him, accommodated him, served him in ways that went far beyond enchanted convenience. It wasn't random. It wasn't subtle anymore, either. The castle is alive, he said. Not like us. More like an ecosystem. 1,000 years of magic layered on top of itself, feeding on the ley lines underneath, maintaining itself, evolving. It has awareness. Not thoughts exactly, more like instincts. And ever since I arrived, it's been treating me like. He searched for the right word. Like what? Ron asked. Like I belong to it. The great hall buzzed around them, students eating, arguing, laughing, completely unaware that the building they lived in had opinions about who walked its corridors. Harry felt the castle's pulse beneath his feet, steady and warm, synced with the second heartbeat behind his ribs. Every night, the bond deepened. Every night, the system fed and grew, and the castle fed it more. I think it's the auto-farming, Harry said, keeping his voice low. My system absorbs ambient magic. Hogwarts is the most magic-saturated place in Britain. But it's not just passive absorption anymore, the castle is actively channeling magic into me. Like it recognizes my system as compatible. Like it's been waiting for someone who could interface with it. Hermione's quill was moving across the notebook at furious speed. Interface. You're describing a symbiotic relationship between your magical core and the castle's ward network. Something like that. Harry, if that's true, if you're genuinely integrated with Hogwarts at a structural level, the implications are staggering. You could potentially access any part of the castle, any enchantment, any defense. You could, I know. He met her eyes. I'm figuring it out as I go. Ron looked between them with the expression of someone watching a tennis match played at twice normal speed. So the castle likes you. That's good, right? Better than the castle trying to kill you. Significantly better, Harry agreed. That afternoon, during a free period, it happened for the first time in a way that couldn't be explained away. Harry was walking alone on the 7th floor. Ron was at Quidditch tryout observations, his brothers had dragged him along, and Hermione was in the library, neck-deep in books about Hogwarts founding that she'd pulled from the restricted section using a permission slip she'd somehow charmed out of Flitwick. Harry had nowhere particular to be, so he walked, letting the castle guide him, following the subtle pulls in the magic that steered him left instead of right, up instead of down. He found himself in a corridor he hadn't visited before, blank stone walls, a single tapestry depicting a wizard trying to teach trolls ballet, and nothing else. Dead end. Except it wasn't. The wall opposite the tapestry shimmered. Not visually, magically. Harry felt it before he saw it, a concentration of enchantment so dense it was almost solid, hidden behind what appeared to be bare stone. He stopped walking and faced the wall. Reached out with his senses and pushed. The wall responded. Stone rippled like water, and a door appeared, large, wooden, iron-handled, warm to the touch. It hadn't been there a second ago. Harry was certain no one else could see it unless the castle wanted them to. He opened the door. The room beyond was vast. Cathedral-high ceiling supported by arched beams. A stone floor worn smooth. And filling the space, practice dummies, bookshelves, weapon racks, a dueling platform, and in the far corner, a comfortable seating area with a fireplace that ignited the moment Harry stepped inside. The room of requirement. He knew the name the way he knew ward theory and potion chemistry, from the castle's own memory, absorbed during the nightly sessions, filed away until the moment it became relevant. The room had been built by the founders as a space that became whatever the occupant needed. It responded to intent, reshaping itself to serve. But Harry hadn't been intending anything specific. He'd just been walking. The castle had brought him here on its own, and the room had configured itself without being asked. It had decided what Harry needed before Harry had. He walked to the nearest bookshelf and ran his fingers along the spines. Advanced Combat Transfiguration. Dueling Theory and Practice. The Architecture of Wards, a Comprehensive Guide. Elemental Magic, Beyond the Four Pillars. Books that wouldn't appear on any Hogwarts syllabus, each one radiating old, deep magic. The room wanted to teach him. Harry pulled out a book, Dueling Theory and Practice by Galatea Merithot, a name his system flagged as a former Hogwarts professor, and sat in the armchair by the fire. He read for 2 hours, but reading was almost redundant. His system was absorbing the knowledge directly from the magically infused pages, processing theory into instinct at a rate that made conscious study feel like walking when you could fly. By the time he left, he understood dueling at a level most adults never reached. Footwork, timing, spell chains, shield variations, the psychology of magical combat, all of it integrated, all of it available, all of it ready. The door vanished behind him when he stepped into the corridor. The wall returned to blank stone. But the room remained, Harry could feel it, waiting for him to come back. A private training ground that the castle itself had provided, tailored to accelerate his growth. He was going to use it every day. The confrontation with Malfoy came Thursday night, and it was exactly as predictable as Harry had expected. He was leaving dinner with Ron and Hermione when Malfoy stepped into their path, flanked by Crabbe and Goyle, wearing the particular expression of someone who'd rehearsed this moment in a mirror. 2 weeks of watching Harry dominate every class had done something to Draco Malfoy, cracked the assumption that blood and name were enough, replaced it with something sharper and more dangerous. Envy with teeth. Potter. Malfoy's voice carried the practiced drawl of his father, but there was an edge to it that Lucius Malfoy would have smoothed away. Draco was 11. His control wasn't as good. I've been watching you show off in every class like you think you're better than everyone else. I don't think it, Harry said mildly. It just keeps happening. Ron snorted. Crabbe and Goyle shifted like boulders preparing to roll downhill. Hermione's hand drifted toward her wand. Malfoy's cheeks colored. You think you're special because you've got a scar and some parlor tricks? My father says, your father says a lot of things from what I've heard. Most of them to people he's trying to impress or intimidate. Which one are you doing right now? The corridor had gone quiet. Students who'd been passing stopped to watch, the way people always stopped when the air got tight and a fight started brewing. Harry counted at least 15 witnesses, including a pair of 7th years who were leaning against the wall with the comfortable posture of spectators at a sporting event. Malfoy's jaw tightened. His hand went to his wand. Wizard's Duel. Tonight. Midnight. Trophy Room. Unless you're scared. I'm not scared, Malfoy. I'm also not stupid. You're going to tell Filch and try to get me caught out of bed. The flicker in Malfoy's eyes confirmed it. Harry's system didn't even need to read his body language, the plan was written on his face. But I'll tell you what, Harry said. Forget midnight. Forget the trophy room. Right here. Right now. Malfoy blinked. What? You want a duel? Let's go. Harry stepped back, creating space in the corridor, and drew his wand. The holly wood was warm in his hand, humming softly, eager. You and me. No seconds. No sneaking around after curfew. If you actually want to prove something, prove it. The corridor went very, very still. Malfoy looked at Crabbe. Looked at Goyle. Looked at the 15-odd students watching, and realized that walking away now would be worse than losing. It would be conceding that he'd never had a chance. His pride made the decision his brain wouldn't have. He drew his wand. Fine. They faced each other across 10 feet of stone corridor. Hermione pulled Ron back against the wall. The seventh years straightened up. One of them cast a quiet shielding charm around the spectators, experienced enough to know that first-year duels could spray. Whenever you're ready, Harry said. Malfoy attacked first. Credit to him, he didn't hesitate. Flipendo. The knockback Jinx shot from his wand in a bolt of blue light, well aimed, decently powered. Harry didn't dodge. He didn't shield. He caught the Jinx. His left hand came up, palm out, and the bolt of blue light hit it and stopped. It hovered there, spinning against his skin, and Harry felt his system analyze it in real time, the structure, the intent, the power level, before he closed his fist and the Jinx winked out like a snuffed candle. The corridor was silent. Malfoy stared at his empty hand, where the wand was trembling slightly, then at Harry's closed fist. His face had gone the color of old parchment. My turn, Harry said. He didn't use a spell. Didn't speak an incantation or wave his wand. He just looked at Malfoy, thought up, and Draco Malfoy lifted off the floor. The blonde boy's shoes left the stone. He rose, 1 foot, 2 feet, 3 feet, until he was eye level with the torch brackets, his robes dangling, his legs kicking at empty air. Crabbe and Goyle lunged forward, grabbing at Malfoy's ankles, and Harry lifted them too. All 3 boys hung suspended in the corridor like puppets with their strings held by a very calm, very unimpressed puppeteer. Let me down, Potter. Malfoy's voice cracked between fury and terror. Say please. I will not. Harry flicked his wrist and rotated Malfoy upside down. A quill, 3 sickles, and a chocolate frog wrapper fell out of his pockets. Crabbe made a sound like a distressed cow. Please. Malfoy shouted. Harry set them down gently. All 3 boys hit the stone on their feet, staggered, and stumbled backward. Malfoy's hair was wild, his face scarlet, his dignity in ruins. Crabbe looked like he might be sick. Goyle had started crying, which he was trying very hard to hide. Good duel, Harry said, pocketing his wand. He turned to Ron and Hermione. Shall we? They walked away. Behind them, 15 students stood in stunned silence, and Draco Malfoy stared at the spot where Harry had been standing with an expression that was shifting, slowly, from humiliation through rage and into something Harry would have recognized if he'd looked back. Calculation. Malfoy was many things, but he wasn't stupid. He'd just learned exactly how far out of his depth he was, and unlike Crabbe and Goyle, his first instinct wasn't to run from that information. It was to figure out what to do with it. The duel, if you could call it that, was all over the school by morning. Fred and George Weasley performed a dramatic reenactment at breakfast, taking turns being Malfoy and getting increasingly creative with the levitation, until Percy threatened them with a letter to their mother. The Gryffindor table was electric. The Slytherin table was not. Harry felt the shift. It was subtle but real, a change in the way people moved around him in the corridors, the way conversations dimmed when he entered a room, the way some students leaned toward him and others pulled back. He'd become a gravitational object, and Hogwarts was rearranging itself around his mass. Some students gravitated closer. Neville, who'd been a nervous wreck since arriving, started sitting next to Harry in every class, drawing courage from proximity the way a cold person draws warmth from a fire. Dean Thomas and Seamus Finnegan, their dorm mates, went from friendly to openly admiring. The Weasley twins adopted Harry as an honorary brother and began consulting him on prank logistics, which Harry found genuinely entertaining. Others pulled away. A cluster of Ravenclaws who'd been friendly the first week started avoiding him, and Harry overheard one of them, a sharp-faced boy named Terry Boot, telling a friend that, "It's not natural, no first year should be able to do that, something's wrong with him." A few Hufflepuffs watched him with wide eyes and spoke in whispers. The Slytherins, predictably, closed ranks around Malfoy's wounded pride and radiated hostility. Harry didn't care. Not about the whispers, the fear, or the resentment. He'd spent 10 years in a cupboard being hated for existing. The opinions of 11-year-olds weren't going to move the needle. What he cared about was the third floor. Every night, his system mapped Quirrell's movements. The professor followed the same pattern, leaving his quarters between 1 and 2 a.m., creeping to the third-floor corridor, probing the defenses. He was getting closer. Harry could feel the obstacles weakening under sustained assault, not dramatically, not all at once, but incrementally. Quirrell was patient. Or rather, the thing driving him was patient, the way a chess player is patient, sacrificing time to gain position. Harry spent Wednesday evening in the Room of Requirement, which had reconfigured itself into a war room, maps of the castle, detailed schematics of the ward network, a model of the third-floor corridor with each obstacle marked and labeled. He studied the defenses the way a general studies a battlefield. The three-headed dog, Fluffy, Hagrid had accidentally mentioned, guarded the trapdoor. Below that, in sequence, Devil's Snare, enchanted flying keys, a giant chess set, a troll, already placed and contained, a potions logic puzzle, and finally the Mirror of Erist. Harry's system had identified the last one by cross-referencing the magical signature with castle records. An ancient artifact that showed the viewer their deepest desire. Dumbledore had modified it somehow, added a retrieval mechanism tied to intent. And behind the mirror, at the heart of all these protections, was the object everyone wanted. The Philosopher's Stone. Created by Nicholas Flamel, Dumbledore's old partner. A stone that could produce the elixir of life and turn base metals into gold. Harry's system had put the pieces together from fragments, Hagrid's slip about Flamel, the nature of the protections, the alchemical signature radiating from behind the final door. Voldemort wanted it. Obviously. A wraith clinging to the back of a professor's head needed a body, and the elixir of life was one way to get one. But it wasn't the only way, and that was what bothered Harry. A wizard as brilliant as Voldemort had been, and still was, based on the intelligence Harry could feel behind Quirrell's eyes, wouldn't stake everything on a single plan. The stone was one objective. There would be others. Harry closed the war room down, left the Room of Requirement, and headed for the third-floor corridor. Not sneaking. Walking. At 9 p.m. on a Wednesday night, an hour before curfew, in full view of anyone who happened to be in the corridors. He didn't need darkness or stealth. He needed information, and the fastest way to get it was to go look. The corridor was exactly where Dumbledore had said it would be, right-hand side, third floor, behind a locked door that radiated the particular magic of a headmaster's personal seal. Harry stopped in front of it and reached out with his senses. Behind the door, he felt the dog. 3 heartbeats, 1 body, massive. The creature was asleep, its breathing slow and heavy, filling the room with the sound of a sawmill. It smelled like wet fur and something meaty. Harry pressed his palm flat against the door. The lock recognized the castle's magic flowing through him and clicked open. He pushed the door wide. Fluffy occupied most of the room, an enormous 3-headed dog curled on the floor, each head the size of a car, each mouth full of teeth that could bite through iron. The trapdoor was visible beneath one massive paw. All 3 heads opened their eyes at once. Harry stood in the doorway, backlit by torchlight, and met 6 yellow eyes without flinching. The dog's lips pulled back, exposing teeth. A growl rumbled from 3 throats simultaneously, deep enough to vibrate the stones. Harry let his magic flare. Not aggressively, he wasn't trying to hurt the animal. He simply released the suppression he usually kept in place, let the full weight of his magical presence fill the room like water filling a bowl. The air thickened. The torches behind him flared and then dimmed. His shadow stretched across the floor, reaching the dog, and where it touched, the growling stopped. Fluffy's 6 eyes widened. The 3 heads pulled back, not in fear exactly, but in recognition, the animal instinct that understands when something bigger has entered the room. The leftmost head whined softly. The middle head lowered itself to the floor. The rightmost head tilted, considering, and then did something Harry hadn't expected. It wagged its tail. The massive tail thumped against the stone floor, shaking the room. All 3 heads relaxed. The middle one stretched forward and nudged Harry's chest with a nose the size of a dinner plate, snuffling. Harry scratched behind the middle head's ear. The dog's tail wagged harder. "Good boy," Harry said. "Boys. Whichever." He stayed for 5 minutes, mapping the room with his senses, the trapdoors, enchantments, the layers of protection below, the residual traces of Quirrell's nightly visits. The professor had been using music to put Fluffy to sleep, Harry realized. A simple enchantment that exploited the creature's sensitivity to melody. Clever, but unnecessary if you could do what Harry had just done. He gave the middle head a final pat and left, closing the door behind him. The lock re-engaged automatically. That was reckless. Harry turned. Hermione stood at the end of the corridor, arms crossed, her expression a masterwork of disapproval and concern. She was in her pajamas, a Hogwarts robe thrown over them, her hair even wilder than usual. "Were you following me? I was studying in the common room and I saw you leave. You had the look." "What look?" "The look that says you're about to do something that would give McGonagall a heart attack." She walked toward him, her footsteps echoing in the empty corridor. "What's behind that door?" "A 3-headed dog guarding a trapdoor that leads to a series of magical obstacles protecting the Philosopher's Stone." Hermione stopped walking. Her mouth opened. Closed. Opened again. The Philosopher's Stone. As in Nicholas Flamel's, the elixir of life, Harry, that's one of the most significant magical artifacts in history. What is it doing in a school? Dumbledore is hiding it here. Probably moved it from Gringotts after someone tried to steal it, that break-in over the summer, remember the Daily Prophet article? Harry leaned against the wall. Voldemort wants it. He's using Quirrell to get to it. Quirrell? The stammering, are you sure? There's something living on the back of Quirrell's head, underneath the turban. I've felt it since the leaky cauldron. It's Voldemort, or what's left of him. A wraith, a fragment, something that survived when his body was destroyed. He's possessing Quirrell and using him to bypass the stone's defenses. Hermione stared at him in the torchlight. He watched her process it, the initial shock, the rapid analysis, the cross-referencing with everything she'd read and observed. Her mind was extraordinary in its own way, not magically enhanced like his but naturally brilliant, the kind of intelligence that didn't just absorb information but connected it. "Snape," she said suddenly. "Snape suspects something. He's been watching Quirrell, I've seen it at meals. And that night last week when he was limping, I bet he went to check on the dog. He's trying to protect the stone too. Probably. Snape's many things, but he's not working for Voldemort. Not anymore." "How do you know?" "His magic. Dark wizards who serve Voldemort carry a specific residual signature, the dark mark. Snape has one, but it's dormant, faded. He turned away from that a long time ago. The grief I see when he looks at me, that's about my mother. Whatever happened between them, it broke him away from Voldemort's cause." Hermione was quiet for a moment, turning this over. "What are you going to do?" "Watch. Learn. Let Quirrell think he's making progress. And when he makes his move, I'll be there. Dumbledore set this up. The protections, the obstacles, they're tests. Not just for whoever tries to steal the stone, but for me. He's watching to see what I do. Whether I follow the rules or follow my instincts. Harry pushed off the wall. I'm following my instincts. They walked back toward Gryffindor Tower together, the castle clearing their path with subtle shifts, a staircase that waited for them, a door that opened silently to avoid waking a portrait. Hermione. Yes. Thank you for following me. She glanced at him sideways. You didn't need the help. No. But it's nice to know someone's watching my back. The faintest smile crossed her face. That's what friends are for, Harry. He liked the way she said it, matter of fact, no drama, like friendship was a structural truth rather than an emotion. He liked that about Hermione in general. She didn't perform feelings. She built them like she built arguments, carefully, logically, and with the intent to make them last. They said goodnight in the common room and went to their respective dormitories. Harry lay in bed and felt the system engage, the castle's magic flowing into him with the force of a river in spring. He was already so far beyond the first night's growth that comparing the two was like comparing a candle to a bonfire. His core was a furnace now, burning hot and deep, and the knowledge flooding in was no longer limited to basic spell work, it was architecture, history, combat theory, magical biology, the deep structure of the world he'd been born into. He fell asleep with the castle singing in his bones, and the second heartbeat pulsed in time with Hogwarts' own, and the boy and the building grew together in the dark. Thursday morning brought flying lessons with Madame Hooch, a hawk-eyed woman with silver hair who lined the Gryffindors and Slytherins up on the lawn with school brooms that looked like they'd survived several wars and lost most of them. Stick your right hand over your broom and say, "Up," Hooch commanded. Harry held out his hand. Up. The broom slammed into his palm so hard it stung. Around him, other students were struggling. Ron's broom rolled over lazily, Hermione's twitched but stayed on the ground, Neville's didn't move at all. Harry's had practically leapt. But the broom was wrong. He could feel it, the enchantments were fraying, the levitation charms unbalanced, the speed regulators barely functional. A school broom, mass-produced and poorly maintained. It would fly, but it would fly badly. Harry mounted anyway. Hooch gave instructions about gripping and leaning and not falling to your death, and then they kicked off. The moment Harry's feet left the ground, something clicked. Flying wasn't like spellwork or potions or transfiguration, it wasn't about knowledge or power or technique. It was about feel. The broom responded to intent, to body language, to the smallest shift in weight and thought, and Harry's body, 10 years of system-enhanced reflexes, spatial awareness sharpened to a razor's edge, a connection to his magic so deep it was instinctual, was built for this. He rose 10 feet, 20, 30, feeling the wind on his face and the broom vibrating beneath him with the eagerness of a horse that wanted to run. Below, Hooch was shouting something, but Harry was already moving, banking left, rolling right, diving and pulling up with a smoothness that made the school broom perform like something 3 times its quality. Neville's broom, meanwhile, had decided to betray him. The round-faced boy shot upward like a cork from a bottle, clinging on with both hands, his broom jerking and spinning out of control. Hooch was yelling. Students were screaming. Neville's grip failed at 40 feet, and he fell. Harry moved. He didn't think about it. Didn't calculate angles or plan a trajectory. His body simply reacted, rolling into a vertical dive, wind tearing at his robes, the school broom screaming in protest as he pushed it past every limit it had. The ground rushed up. Neville tumbled through the air, arms flailing, face white with terror. Harry intercepted him at 15 feet, one arm hooking around the boy's waist, the other wrenching the broom level, and they pulled out of the dive 3 feet above the grass, skidding to a stop in a spray of torn turf. Neville clung to Harry like a drowning man, hyperventilating, tears streaming down his cheeks. Harry held him steady until his breathing slowed. "You're okay," Harry said. "I've got you." Neville looked up at him with wide, watery eyes. You caught me." "Yeah. I was falling and you just, how did you, I'm fast." The class had gathered around them. Madame Hooch was running across the lawn, her face the color of old parchment. Ron was grinning so wide his face might split. Hermione had both hands over her mouth. And up in the castle, watching from a window that Harry's senses identified as the first-floor faculty lounge, Minerva McGonagall had just seen something that changed her priorities entirely. Harry felt her watching. Felt the calculation behind her eyes shift from concern about his magical power to excitement about something much simpler. A seeker. She wanted him for the Quidditch team. The invitation came 2 hours later, delivered by McGonagall herself in a tone that suggested refusal wasn't an option. First-year students are not normally permitted their own broomsticks or positions on house teams, she said, standing very straight in the corridor. I am making an exception. You will join the Gryffindor team as seeker. Oliver Wood, the captain, will contact you about practice schedules. A Nimbus 2000 will be provided. A Nimbus, Ron, who'd been eavesdropping from around the corner, made a strangled sound. McGonagall's lips twitched. That will be all, Mr. Potter. She turned and walked away, and Harry let himself smile. Not because of Quidditch, though the prospect of flying a real broom instead of that barely functional school disaster was appealing, but because McGonagall's decision told him something important about how the faculty saw him. They weren't trying to suppress his abilities. They were channeling them. Giving him outlets. Keeping him engaged. Smart. Dumbledore's influence, probably. Better to aim the weapon than try to contain it. That evening, Harry returned to the room of requirement. It had reconfigured again, this time into something between a training arena and a study, with a dueling platform at the center, bookshelves along the walls, and a large window that shouldn't have been possible on an interior room but showed a view of the Hogwarts grounds under moonlight. He spent 3 hours there. The first hour was reading, advanced defensive magic, shield theory, countercurse technique. The second hour was practice, casting, refining, testing the limits of what his body could channel without strain. The answer, increasingly, was almost anything. His system had expanded his magical capacity so far beyond normal parameters that spells which would exhaust an adult wizard felt like flexing a finger. The third hour, he sat cross-legged on the floor and reached out with his senses as far as they'd go. He found Quirrell in his office, the dark presence under the turban active and agitated, muttering in a language Harry's system identified as Parseltongue, snake language, the tongue of Slytherin's line, which Harry understood perfectly. The words were fragments, half-formed plans: the boy grows too fast, must move before the solstice, the stone, yes, but the boy, if I could take what he has. Harry's blood chilled. Not with fear, with recognition. Voldemort wasn't just trying to steal the stone. He was interested in Harry. In the system. In the mechanism that was making Harry stronger every night. The Dark Lord had sensed it, studied it from across the castle, and he wanted it. That changed things. Harry pulled his awareness back and sat in the quiet of the room of requirement, thinking. The fireplace crackled. The false moon shone through the impossible window. And the castle hummed around him, protective, alert, its own vast intelligence processing the same threat Harry was. A knock at the door. But there was no door, the room was hidden, sealed, accessible only to those who knew it existed. The door appeared anyway, and opened, and Albus Dumbledore stepped through. He was wearing midnight blue robes with silver stars embroidered on the cuffs, and his expression was the carefully neutral one he wore when he was most concerned. He took in the room, the training arena, the bookshelves, the view, with a single sweeping glance that missed nothing. The room of requirement, he said. I should have known it would reveal itself to you. It's been sealed for decades, I couldn't find it myself the last 3 times I looked. The castle opened it for me, Harry said. I didn't ask. Dumbledore conjured a comfortable armchair and sat down across from Harry with the ease of a man who'd made himself at home in stranger places. I felt a disturbance in the wards this evening. A resonance coming from this part of the castle that I haven't sensed in my lifetime. The castle's magical core spiked. I traced it here. That was me training. So I gathered. Dumbledore studied him, the blue eyes sharp behind their spectacles. Harry, I want to have a conversation with you. Not as headmaster to student, but as one wizard to another. Go ahead. I've been watching you since you arrived. Not just through the monitoring enchantments, personally. I've observed your classes, your interactions, your growth. And what I've seen concerns me. My power concerns you. Your rate of power concerns me. You are growing stronger every day, at a pace that has no historical parallel. If this continues, and I see no reason it would stop, you will surpass me within the year. Possibly within months. Harry met his gaze. And that scares you. It terrifies me, Dumbledore said simply. Not because I fear you, Harry, I don't. I've looked into your heart, as much as you've allowed me to, and I see no darkness there. But power of the kind you're accumulating, it attracts attention. It provokes reactions. Voldemort already knows something is happening. I can feel his agitation through the connection to your scar, the same connection that lets you sense his presence. He's afraid of you, Harry. And a frightened Voldemort is the most dangerous thing in the world. He wants the system, Harry said. I heard him. Through Quirrell. He doesn't just want the stone, he wants what I have. Dumbledore went very still. You heard him. Parseltongue. He was talking to himself, making plans. He mentioned moving before the solstice. The winter solstice is in December. That gives us roughly 3 months. Dumbledore leaned forward, his hands clasped, the grandfatherly mask entirely gone. This was the war general, the man who defeated Grindelwald, the strategist who'd held the wizarding world together through 2 dark wars. Harry, I must ask you to let me handle this. No. The stone is bait. I placed it here deliberately, with protections designed to delay Voldemort, not stop him. The plan was always for him to attempt the theft and be caught. If you intervene prematurely, your plan relies on Voldemort being predictable. He isn't. He's not just after the stone anymore, Professor. He's after me. After what's inside me. That changes your calculations. Dumbledore was quiet for a long moment. The fire crackled. The moon shone. You're right, he said finally. It does. He rubbed his eyes behind his spectacles, and for a moment he looked his age, old, tired, carrying the weight of decades of impossible choices. I am not accustomed to being outmaneuvered by an 11-year-old. I'm not trying to outmaneuver you. I'm trying to work with you. But you have to treat me as a partner, not a piece on your board. A partner. Dumbledore seemed to taste the word. I have not had a true partner since, well, in a very long time. He stood, vanished the conjured chair, and looked at Harry with an expression that held something new. Not the calculated warmth of a mentor managing a student. Something raw. Something that might have been respect. Very well, Mr. Potter. Partners. But I have conditions. Name them. You will share what you learn with me. All of it. If Voldemort makes a move, you tell me first. And if there comes a moment when you are in genuine danger, not a duel you can win, not a threat you can handle, but real, mortal danger, you will let me help. Agreed. My conditions. Dumbledore raised an eyebrow. You have conditions. Don't lie to me. Don't withhold information because you think I'm not ready. And don't try to control my growth. The system is mine. It does what it does. If you try to suppress it or study it without my consent, our partnership ends. The headmaster met his eyes for a long, measuring moment. Then, slowly, he smiled, not the twinkling grandfather smile, but something real and slightly sad. Agreed, Dumbledore said. You are very much your mother's son, Harry. She had the same talent for making powerful men feel foolish. He moved toward the door, then paused. One last thing. The castle's response to you, the doors, the staircases, the room of requirement, the way the very stones seem to reshape themselves around your presence. I've been headmaster for decades, and Hogwarts has never treated me the way it treats you. What does that mean? I don't know. But I intend to find out. He opened the door, stepped into the corridor, and looked back. Good night, Harry. Sleep well. I always do, Harry said. That's sort of the point. Dumbledore chuckled, a genuine, warm sound, and the door closed behind him. The room of requirement sealed itself, the walls smoothing over, and Harry was alone with the fire and the moon and the hum of a castle that was, moment by moment, becoming more his than anyone else's. He left the room at 11, walked back to Gryffindor Tower through corridors that opened for him and staircases that held still, and climbed into bed. Ron was snoring. Neville was mumbling about broomsticks in his sleep. The dormitory was warm and dark and safe. Harry closed his eyes. The system surged. Tonight's session was different. The castle wasn't just feeding him, it was teaching him, pouring in not just raw magic but structured knowledge, organized and curated like a lesson plan. Ward theory from the Founders' era. Battle magic from the Goblin Wars. Healing techniques that St. Mungo's would have classified as restricted. The castle was opening its archives, its thousand-year memory, and sharing everything it had with the boy who'd become its anchor. Harry's core expanded. His channels widened. New abilities crystallized in his mind, not as abstract theory but as felt knowledge, the way a musician knows a song not in their head but in their hands. He could feel himself becoming something that didn't have a name yet, something the wizarding world hadn't seen in centuries. Not just powerful. Not just skilled. Complete, in a way that other wizards, who learned magic piece by piece over decades, could never be. By dawn, when the first grey light crept through the dormitory windows, Harry Potter was stronger than every professor in Hogwarts except Albus Dumbledore. By the end of the week, that exception would be gone. And somewhere on the third floor, in the dark behind a locked door, a dark wizard in a turban pressed his hand against ancient protections and felt them weakened by another fraction. The wraith on the back of his head whispered urgently, "Faster, we must move faster, the boy is becoming untouchable," and Quirrell obeyed, because when the ghost of the most dangerous Dark Lord in history tells you to hurry, you hurry. The race was on. The castle knew whose side it was on. Chapter 4, What Professors Can't Teach. Rain hammered the castle that week. Wind howled through the battlements like a warning, and the lake turned to black glass flecked with spray from waves that broke against the cliffs. Inside, Hogwarts was restless. The portraits muttered, the suits of armor whispered creaks like murmured secrets. Students stuck indoors grew louder and bored, Peeves became a small natural disaster. And through it all, Harry Potter trained. The room of requirement had become his command center, part dueling hall, part library, part mirror to the shifting demands of his growth. Every night after curfew, he slipped inside, the castle sealing the door behind him as if in conspiracy. Tonight the room hummed with light from half-lit candles and the white glow of spellfire. Harry stood in the center, shirt sleeves rolled to elbows, wand flashing through arcs faster than sight, his magic flaring and reforming at will. Not incantations. Not patterns. Instinct. He'd stopped casting spells weeks ago. He spoke to magic now, as if it were language, one that answered only him. The bolts that tore through the air weren't random light, they were commands made manifest. It was what the farmers of his magic called command casting, but the room called it something else, symbiosis. And tonight, he wasn't alone. Potter. The voice came sharp, precise, from the door that hadn't been there seconds ago. Harry turned. Professor McGonagall stood on the threshold, her hair silver in candlelight, expression somewhere between pride and worry. No teacher should have been able to find the entrance, the room revealed itself only to those it wanted. That the castle allowed her and told Harry she'd been watching long enough for it to trust her. "How long have you been there?" "Long enough," she said, stepping inside. Her boots made no sound. Her eyes flicked to the floating sigils Harry hadn't bothered to dissipate. And long enough to realize I was wasting half my career. Harry blinked. That's not something I expected to hear. McGonagall's sleeve lifted, her wand flicked. The air cracked, a transformation that turned a nearby chair into a wolfhound mid-leap. The conjured beast landed with molten grace, growling softly. Harry raised his hand and dissipated it with one pulse of power. Smoke drifted. They stood in silence, teacher and student, the air still shivering with raw potential. You aren't here to scold me, Harry said. Her mouth pressed thinner. If I intended to, it would be an insult to us both. You're far beyond anything I could contain with words or detentions. She hesitated, then, you're performing magic I can't explain. The castle's reporting the fluctuations to Dumbledore every night, wards flexing, channels widening, and now even the ghosts say they feel you in the walls. You're scaring my school. I'm not harming it, Harry said quietly. We're connected. It's learning through me. I'm learning through it. That may be true, but nothing of this scale happens without cost. Magic demands balance. It hasn't demanded anything yet. It will, McGonagall said. It always does. Her tone wasn't rebuke, it was prophecy. Harry felt it in her voice. Then she did something he hadn't expected, lowered her wand and conjured another chair. Sit. We're dueling. Harry frowned. A lesson or a challenge? Neither. A recalibration. He sat opposite her, and for a long moment, the room quieted around them. The candles steadied. McGonagall's wand traced a circle midair, then split into mirrored glyphs of silver light that rose and hovered between them. These are protections, she said. Rules. Not for me, for the castle. It doesn't like violence between those it favors. It will interfere if I don't define boundaries. The glyphs sank to the floor, forming a static ring around their feet. The tiles changed color inside it, glowing faintly amber. Duelers' bond. Harry felt it take root beneath his shoes. She stood. Her eyes locked on his with the metallic calm of someone long past fear. On my mark. There wasn't time for a mark. Harry's reflexes caught the incoming spell half a breath before McGonagall's wand moved. Transversus, she snapped, a lattice of light slashing across the air, weaving instantly into a net, the transversal bind, a spell for restraining fast-moving foes. Harry dropped low as his body reacted faster than thought, the net brushing his hair and dissolving into sparks. He rose, palm outward, and the sparks stilled, paused, then folded themselves neatly back into the circle. McGonagall's eyebrows lifted minutely. You control what others cast. Only if they use freeform weaving, Harry said. The structure is open enough that I can rewrite it. Show me. Her next gesture blurred, no incantation, only pure thought, transfiguring air into crystalline shards that shot forward like ice from a winter storm. Harry sidestepped one, parried the second with a twist of intent, and on the third, he caught it. Reached up, stopped it midair, and flipped it. The shard hovered before McGonagall. It dissolved, reforming briefly into silvered mist that shaped itself into a cat, blinked once at its maker, and vanished in a shimmer. Transfiguration echoes recognize ownership, Harry said. The magic knows who's skilled enough to create it. If it doesn't resist, I can shape it. McGonagall studied him. For the first time, approval showed in her face like the break of sun through rain. You are redefining the laws of sequence casting. Gods, Lily would have adored seeing this. The words hit harder than a duel. Harry blinked, breath catching. You knew her well. McGonagall's smile was soft, almost invisible. She was my best student before you. Sharp as a blade, impossible to intimidate, fiercely protective of anyone weaker. You're very like her, though you hide it behind quiet and equations. "I'd like to know more about her," Harry said. "Beyond the stories. Then stay alive long enough, and I'll tell you everything." McGonagall flicked her wand, the dual circle faded. "Dismissed for the evening, Mr. Potter. And if you're going to keep rewriting magic, at least have the decency to start taking notes. The world will need them when you're done." She left. The door sealed after her. Harry sank into the chair she'd conjured, the warmth of her presence still lingering. The castle's hum shifted, subtle as a sigh. Approval. The next morning brought no time for reflection. Quidditch. Saturday dawned bright and treacherous, clear skies alternating with gusts sharp enough to snap flags. The stadium roared with voices. Thousands of students, banners waving, old ghosts drifting above the stands. Gryffindor versus Slytherin, the rivalry of legends. Oliver Wood paced beside the pitch, chanting play strategies under his breath. Fred and George grinned opposite him, bats slung over shoulders. Katie, Angelina, and Alicia hovered near center circle. And Harry rolled his new Nimbus 2000 between his palms like a living thing. Its enchantments pulsed beneath the polished handle. Balanced perfectly. It wanted to fly. McGonagall had been right, he was made for this. Potter, Wood barked. "Seek fast, avoid bludgers, and for the love of Merlin, stay alive till we get 2 goals in." Harry smirked. "No promises." The whistle blew. They kicked off. The world dropped away. Sky swallowed sound. Wind tore at robes, tugging hair against his forehead. The crowd blurred into color. Harry leaned forward and the Nimbus sang, a high, bright resonance through his magic, his body, his very blood. Speed wasn't movement anymore, it was being everywhere at once. Malfoy was Slytherin's seeker, his face locked in its usual mask of smirk and control, but the expression cracked the first time Harry passed him. Not lapped. Passed. The Nimbus cut spirals around Malfoy's clunky Comet 260, leaving a slipstream that nearly sent the blonde boy spinning. By the 3rd lap, whispers rippled through the stands. By the 5th, there was only silence. Then Wood's shout, "Snitch, left flank." Harry didn't think. He became motion. The wind screamed in his ears. Malfoy saw the same glimmer, a flash of gold hugging the far edge of the pitch, and urged his broom into a dive. For a heartbeat, they were parallel, shoulder to shoulder, one chasing glory, the other chasing oblivion. Bludgers cut through the air. One smashed past Harry's right arm, another veered for his head. He spun under it, feeling the whisper of metal an inch away, and stretched, fingers closing around something warm and alive. He pulled out of the dive inches above the ground and raised his hand. The snitch gleamed between his fingers, wings fluttering weakly. The explosion of sound was physical, a tidal wave crashing through ears and bones. Red and gold banners blurred. Fred and George executed a midair victory spin so reckless even the ghosts gasped. Harry hovered midfield, heart pounding, the snitch's tiny heartbeat sinking with his second one. He felt the castle's magic shimmer around him, echoing in the air, a pulse that spread through the crowd like static. For a moment, everything at Hogwarts, castle, sky, students, ghosts, felt alive in the same breath. The castle was proud of him. Then, a ripple that was not pride. Dark magic surged beneath the stands. Sudden, sharp, wrong. Harry froze in midair. His eyes swept the stands, and the world changed color. Magic sight flared, everything bathed in patterns of aura and light. Thousands of signatures, bright and mundane, students, teachers, enchanted stadium charms. And there, one flare of wrongness, a streak of black coiling through gold. Quirrell. The defense professor stood at the edge of the staff section, one hand gripping his turban, the other half hidden in his robes. His lips moved. Below him, Harry's broom bucked. The Nimbus lurched as if jerked by invisible ropes. It twisted violently left, then right, nearly appending him. Gasps rose from the crowd. The narrative memory of the stands was instant. Potter's broom, look, it's cursed. Harry held tight, but his fingers felt like ice. Not the broom, it wasn't mechanical. The control charm that guided its stabilizers was being subverted. Someone was threading direct interference with his magic signature. Someone was trying to turn the broom on him. And Harry felt exactly who. Flitwick reacted first. The tiny professor dragged out his wand, shield charm sparking around the stands, but whatever Quirrell was doing didn't leave normal traces. This wasn't a jinx. It was a direct override of enchantment permission, something that required contact with both object and target's resonance. Hermione was already running down from the Gryffindor stand, her hair a halo in the wind, sprinting for the staff dais. Harry didn't wait to be saved. He forced calm into his breathing and reached inward, past skin, past heartbeat, to the link between himself and the castle. The broom's enchantment sat like threads in his perception, connected to the ambient web of the arena. Someone, somewhere, was pulling one of those threads tight, choking the whole system. So he rewrote it. Magic flared outward like an explosion without light. Every charm on every broom flickered once, then harmonized to his frequency. The interference vanished mid-spell. Quirrell staggered backward, the black aura collapsed. From where he stood, Dumbledore flicked a wrist, a line of binding magic lashing out discreetly and slamming Quirrell's wand hand to his chest before anyone noticed. Harry angled his broom downward and landed. The crowd went berserk. Noise thundered, drowning everything else. He handed the snitch to Wood with a grin that didn't reach his eyes. Next time, Harry said quietly, tell Hooch to check the wards before kickoff. Wood blinked. What? Oh, yeah. Will do. But Dumbledore's eyes, across the pitch, were on Harry. Not questioning this time. Measuring. Later that night, Gryffindor's common room turned to chaos. Fred and George reenacted the snitch catch 3 times on assorted pieces of furniture. Ron kept shouting, that was unbelievable, and Hermione alternated between scolding and sheer relief. The party lasted until McGonagall finally stormed in at midnight and confiscated half the butterbeer. Harry pretended to laugh along, but his thoughts were elsewhere, Quirrell's trembling hand, Dumbledore's subdued containment, and the faint shimmer of Voldemort's presence in that magic, subtle as oil on water. He didn't sleep immediately that night. He went straight to the room of requirement again. This time the room built something different, a hall of mirrors, each one reflecting a version of him in subtle distortion, one older, one darker, one broken, one crowned. Hallucinations built by the castle's understanding of potential. When he reached the center, a single mirror stood waiting against nothing, the mirror of Eriste. Its surface shimmered. His reflection looked back, except he wasn't alone. Behind him stood his parents, tall, proud, smiling. Lily's green eyes. James's grin. Hermione and Ron farther to one side, older, confident. A whole constellation of people he hadn't yet let himself hope to keep. For a dangerous moment, he wanted to step forward. Then the system stirred. Cold logic overrode longing. The mirror's enchantment pulsed through the room like a heartbeat. It wasn't showing him ghosts. It was showing him temptation. Designed as a test. Hello, old friend, said a quiet voice. Dumbledore's reflection appeared beside his own before the man even entered the room in truth. When he stepped through, his expression was unexpectedly gentle. I hoped you'd find this mirror only once, Dumbledore said. But perhaps Hogwarts brings us what we need, not what we want. Harry didn't look away from his reflection. It's part of the stone's protection sequence, isn't it? It is. The final obstacle. Only one who seeks the stone with no intent for use may retrieve it. Dumbledore looked at him sideways. What do you see? Harry smiled faintly. Everyone I care about alive. Whole. Safe. A noble reflection. It's also a dangerous one. Desire like that makes people careless. He turned from the mirror. You designed this layer, didn't you? Guilty. Dumbledore's smile turned weary. I intended it as a lesson, that the happiest man in the world could look in the mirror and see himself as he is. I suppose I'm not there yet. Dumbledore chuckled softly. Ideals shouldn't be reached too soon. They leave us nothing to learn. Then his voice lowered. He'll make another attempt, Harry. Sooner than planned. Voldemort knows the protections react to you. He'll try to turn that bond against us. Let him. Harry's voice was quiet steel. Every time he moves, I grow stronger. Every night the castle feeds more to me. If he wants to steal this, he tapped his chest, he'll have to face what it's become. For a long moment, Dumbledore said nothing. Then, you speak like a man, but you are still a boy. Remember to leave yourself room to be one. He touched the mirror once, affectionately, like an old wound. Enjoy your victory tomorrow. You've earned it. When he vanished, the room stilled again. The mirror faded, replaced by blank stone. Harry looked into the reflectionless surface and whispered, I won't waste what they died to give me. The answer came from the walls, a low hum, warm and deep, like agreement. Halloween arrived with the storm it deserved. By evening, everyone was drenched from the dash between classes and the great hall. Pumpkins the size of boulders lit the walls with soft orange light. Plate after plate appeared, steaming, endless. For a few blissful hours, Hogwarts felt like the world's safest place. Until the door slammed open. Professor Quirrell stumbled inside, face pale, turban askew, terror so thick it radiated. Troll, he shrieked. In the dungeons. Troll, in the dungeons. Then he collapsed. For a second, chaos. Screams, dropped goblets, the metallic scrape of benches. Dumbledore's voice rose above it all, magnified by magic. Silence. The hall obeyed. The word had that old, command-laced power that stopped hearts. Prefects, lead your houses to their dormitories. Professors, follow me. We'll handle the intruder. But Harry's instinct screamed wrong. Troll in the dungeons, he muttered. Why warn us and collapse here, unless you wanted everyone away from somewhere else? Hermione's eyes widened. The third floor. He nodded once. Exactly. Ron clutched his wand, expression shifting between panic and determination. Then we go the other way. They slipped from the escort line while the professors herded students out. The corridors beyond the hall were half deserted, echoing with distant thunder and the thud of erratic footsteps. They found the troll quicker than expected. It was in the girls' bathroom, a stench of rot and stone, a pair of tusks larger than human arms, swinging a club that could crush a carriage. It was 12 feet tall and twice as stupid. Unfortunately, it was also standing between them and Hermione, who had, in typical Hermione fashion, gone into the nearest bathroom instead of the dormitory and now had a wall about to collapse behind her. Harry didn't think. He moved. Magic flared through the corridor as he shoved Ron behind him. The troll turned, dumb surprise frozen mid-roar, just as Harry stepped inside. For every spell a student could learn, Harry now knew 10 analogues older than language. He picked one without hesitation. The air went white. Sound punched outward, a pressure wave so sudden it snapped torches from walls. The troll's club froze mid-swing. Then, slowly, its eyes rolled back. The massive body toppled forward, hitting the floor with a shudder that made water leap from sinks. Harry stood over it, hand outstretched, magic still thrumming around him like static. Hermione exhaled shakily. What was that? Compression wave, he said. Localized stunner built out of kinetic magic. Learned it an hour ago. Ron peered at the troll's slack face. You learned a weapon an hour ago? I'm a fast study. Hermione's lip trembled between outrage and relief. You're unbelievable. Thank you, Harry said sincerely. Professors arrived minutes later, McGonagall, Snape behind her, Dumbledore last. Their eyes took in the scene: smashed stonework, unconscious mountain of troll, 3 first-years covered in dust, Harry calm as a statue. Snape's lip twitched. I suppose detention would be pointless. Quite, Dumbledore said, and his smile curved like something secret. However, 20 points to Gryffindor, for quick thinking, teamwork, and saving my colleagues the trouble of cleaning up a similar mess. McGonagall sighed, exasperation and pride vying for control. You 3 are a headache waiting to happen. Harry smiled faintly. Already happened, Professor. As they escorted them back, Snape lingered. When the others were ahead, he stepped beside Harry without looking at him. The spell you used, it wasn't in any dueling curriculum. I adapt. Snape scowled. You stole the framework from the Repulso Momentum family and compressed it. How? Harry looked up at him. I understand magic. The way you understand potions. You don't memorize recipes, you see balance. For a fraction of a second, barely visible, a flicker of genuine approval softened Snape's features. Then it vanished. Try not to bring the castle down next time. Only if the troll stays down. Snape snorted, half a laugh, before sweeping away into shadow. That night, long after the others fell asleep, Harry sat awake in his four-poster and felt the system turning. The troll had left traces of old, wild earth magic in the air, and Hogwarts was absorbing it. Feeding it to him. Feeding it to them both. He lay back, eyes closed, listening to the storm outside and the thrum of living stone all around. He wasn't just learning anymore. He was evolving. And somewhere deep under the castle, behind the layers of wards, the faint awareness of the dark wraith turned toward him and began to understand for the first time just how impossible the boy it had marked truly was. Chapter 5, A Dark Lord's Desperation. By mid-November, the castle's wards were starting to twitch. It wasn't visible to anyone except Harry and Dumbledore, but the change was real: subtle ripples across Hogwarts' protective lattice, sharp spikes around the third-floor corridor every time Quirrell stepped near. Voldemort's touch, filtered through his host, was corrosive. The magic recoiled from it the way skin recoils from acid, quietly, steadily, but with mounting violence. For weeks, Harry felt it every night during his auto-farming sessions, a warning pulse deep in the castle's bones. Voldemort wasn't just probing anymore, he was infecting. The safeguards of Hogwarts were beginning to resist, but the resistance wasn't strategic. A fortress doesn't think, it defends. Voldemort thought. That was the difference. And Harry needed to start thinking faster. He spent his days pretending normalcy. Classes, Quidditch practice, common room banter. He laughed with Ron, debated with Hermione, let himself feel like a student long enough to keep McGonagall's anxiety at bay. But behind that laughter lay hours of calculation, ward flow, resonance clusters, pattern graphs chalked onto the room of requirements walls in white fire. He slept less now, not because of exhaustion but because his magic didn't need rest anymore. When his body dozed, his system kept working, his awareness floated above dream state, observing data streams of magical growth the way engineers watch city grids from orbit. And each graph showed the same conclusion. Voldemort was accelerating. The attacks were still subtle, small curses that flickered at night, feints disguised as ghost movements, faint pulses of destabilization around the stone's containment barrier. But Harry could see the trajectory. The dark aura was testing for sequences, studying which defensive layers responded fastest. That kind of pattern meant one thing: preparation for breach. That was when Harry decided to stop observing and start counter-preparing. He spent the next 3 nights redesigning Hogwarts' ward matrix. Not to change Dumbledore's structure, that would risk collapse, but to supplement it. Layered invisibly underneath, Harry wove new sigils in the air, lines of living magic that bent power without drawing notice. The room of requirement helped, the castle itself lent focus. Together, they built what Harry called an adaptive stasis web. If Voldemort tried to corrupt ward channels again, the web would respond not by blocking him but by reflecting his influence back along the flow, multiplying every dark surge. He wasn't building protection. He was building a trap. When he finished, the walls hummed faintly, like satisfied glass. The next day, Transfiguration turned into quiet chaos. McGonagall introduced human-to-animal transformations, advanced magic meant as theory only, but one Ravenclaw boy accidentally half-transfigured his hand into feathers. The class froze. McGonagall's swift counterspell barely stabilized it. Harry stepped forward before she could finish. "Let me," he said calmly. She hesitated only an instant, then nodded. Harry's palm hovered above the boy's arm, magic pouring out in liquid white. His system adapted on instinct, detecting transformation imbalance, correcting molecular gaps, rewriting half-cast runes before they failed. The feathers melted back into skin with no scar, no pain. The classroom went dead quiet. "Missed a declension in your incantation," Harry said to the boy, almost friendly. "It's easy, Latin's finicky about rhythm." McGonagall recovered her voice first. "You reversed a partial transfiguration." Harry shrugged. "It's reversible if you fix the structural signature before it decouples." "Mr. Potter, do you understand what you just did?" "That's advanced," Harry said lightly. It felt straightforward. That evening, Hermione cornered him in the library, whispering so fast her words blurred. "You understand matter-level reconstruction. That's not even theoretically safe for children. Do you realize you're rewriting physical properties with raw magic?" "I do now." "You could teach here," she said faintly. Harry smiled. "Not my goal." "What is your goal?" Hermione asked, more desperate than curious now. "Because the way you're going, you'll eclipse everything Hogwarts can give you in a month. Then Hogwarts will have to keep up." Hermione's jaw clenched, half awe, half frustration. "You sound like Dumbledore sometimes." "I think Dumbledore sounds like me." December brought snow thick enough to mute footsteps. Hogwarts looked ethereal, white fields, icicles hanging from spires, owls cutting the air like shadows. It should have been peace. But Harry felt it every night, the infection spreading faster, sharper, more organized now. Voldemort wasn't testing anymore. He was programming. When Quirrell entered the third-floor corridor, his usually jittery magical signature flattened, controlled, streamlined, efficient. Harry felt something else behind him, a second cadence layered through his essence. Feedback loops. Voldemort was using Quirrell's body like a living wand, running incantations that required two synchronized energies. It hit Harry one night how terrifying that was. Voldemort had reinvented magic itself, parasite-host synchronization, double execution runes powered by split-core flow. Even weakened and half-human, he was innovating. That's what made monsters dangerous, they evolved when cornered. Around midnight, the castle whispered to Harry. A vibration through the floor. Signals. Its consciousness, faint but aware, told him, barrier breach attempt detected. Location, Corridor 3. Section Alpha. Harry rose. No cloak, no trickery, he didn't need stealth. When he arrived, Quirrell was already there. Torchlight painted the walls orange. The turbaned professor knelt before the sealed door like a priest before an altar, runes spiraling around his arms. His lips moved. The air pulsed. But what Harry saw wasn't Quirrell. It was the thing beneath him, a coiled pressure, a presence layered deep, trying to unfold from flesh like smoke from a bottle. Voldemort's awareness pressed against its cage, half-born fire and hatred manifesting through Quirrell's trembling fingers. Harry leaned silently against the wall, watching. Quirrell's voice whispered in two tones, the man's own stammer and an overlay beneath it, smooth and venomous. "Soon, the old fool's spells will fall," muttered that second voice. "His wards resist, but they tire. Oh, how magic ages with its maker." Quirrell shuddered. "We succeed tonight." "Patience, fool. Even immortality requires calculation." Harry stepped from the shadows. "Does failure require it too?" The voice snapped around, Quirrell's body twisting unnaturally fast, wand raised. Voldemort's awareness lit the air, hard and cold. "Who's there?" "Me," Harry said quietly. "The experiment you left behind." Voldemort's laughter slithered out through Quirrell's mouth, metallic, jagged, too large for lungs to contain. "Ah! The boy. The scar. I can feel you. Pulsing brighter every month. Have you come to thank your maker?" "I came to see you fail." Quirrell's hand trembled, Voldemort's voice hardened. "You should have died that night. Instead, my curse remade you. How ironic, the seed of my power grew stronger than I. Tell me, child, what does it feel like to wake every morning less human?" Harry's gaze didn't waver. "Better than waking weaker. Delightful arrogance." Quirrell's wand flared scarlet. "Let us measure it." The corridor exploded. Spells ripped through the air, jet-black curses, chains of energy. Harry moved like thought, shielding, deflecting, letting the bursts pass close enough to tear fabric from his robes but never skin. His core adjusted mid-fight, extrapolating Voldemort's rhythm, two-layer casting, alternating pulse, half-mortal reflex attached to a mortal intent. Brilliant. Efficient. Predictable once understood. Harry let two curses pass, then caught the third. Quirrell's killing curse struck a wall of invisible pressure and shattered into harmless green mist. The shock threw him backward. Harry's counterstrike came as pure, high-frequency resonance, an impact without spell, just a density wave that drove Quirrell into the opposite wall hard enough to crush stone behind him. The turban split, fabric tearing down the middle. The thing underneath screamed, not sound but mind. A distorted face materialized against flesh. Voldemort's imprint. Half-formed eyes, red and furious, fixating on the impossible boy before it. Harry approached, unflinching. "You're cornered," Voldemort hissed through Quirrell's bleeding mouth. But cornered things bite. He unleashed fiend fire, wild, molten, serpent-shaped flame racing across the hall. Real fiend fire, not imitation, the kind that devours everything except the strongest domain magic. Harry didn't shield. He extended a hand, caught the front of the flame, and absorbed it. The fire twisted, roared, coiled around his arm in defiance, then folded inward like silk. The air crackled with shock waves, stone melted in streaks. When light cleared, Harry's sleeve smoldered, but his skin was untouched, eyes reflecting mirrored fire. Voldemort went silent. For the first time, his voice faltered. "What, are you?" "Your mistake," Harry said, and released the flame back. It slammed Quirrell's body flat, burning around him in a ring that carved the tiles. Then Dumbledore arrived. Enough. His roar split the room, ancient magic pouring through words. The flames vanished as if erased by thought. Across the hall, Quirrell convulsed, his body folding in exhaustion. Voldemort's shadow peeled from the skull beneath the turban, fleeing through cracks in air itself, screaming promise and rage. The corridor fell silent. Dumbledore reached Harry in 2 strides, catching his wrist before the remaining energy unwound itself destructively. His eyes weren't angry, they were wide, half fear, half wonder. "Harry," he said gently, "you absorbed fiend fire." "It was hungry," Harry said. "I fed it back." Dumbledore exhaled slowly. "You do realize that's a spell entire Wizengamot treaties ban?" "Then I won't tell them." The headmaster glanced at Quirrell's body, unconscious, breathing shallowly, his host now empty of soul, and said quietly, "He's gone for now. But he's learned something from you." "I know," Harry said, looking at his still glowing fingers. "He touched my system. Tried to reverse it. And failed." "Maybe," Harry said. "Or maybe he succeeded enough to understand how to copy it." Dumbledore closed his eyes briefly, ancient weariness folding his shoulders. "That's what I feared." Quirrell did not return to classes. The rumor was illness. The truth was simpler: he was dying, drained hollow by the parasite that fled. Voldemort's wraith had gone. Not erased, escaped. Harry felt it nightly now, faint across the world like a radio signal buried in fog. Somewhere in Albania, the deathless whisper had begun rebuilding its body. While the Dark Lord licked his wounds, Hogwarts breathed easier. Students celebrated holidays, decorations multiplied, and snow deepened. But neither Dumbledore nor Harry mistook peace for safety. The system, ever vigilant, began adapting defenses beyond Hogwarts. It reached across wards, subtly linking to Diagon Alley, to Hogsmeade, even to the Ministry's underground protective runes through the castle's lay extensions. A silent network, Harry's gift to a world that didn't know it would need it soon. The rest of the term passed in a blur of small greatness. Ron perfected his chess strategies against the enchanted boards McGonagall lent him, testing them for later. Hermione invented a new mnemonic system for counterspells. Harry, seeing her determination, offered her half of his nightly insights, structured, decoded fragments of what his system learned automatically. By March, Hermione's magical power had doubled. "I don't understand half of what you're showing me," she admitted one night in the library, eyes drawn to floating glyphs Harry had sketched in luminous script above their desk. "But every time you explain, I feel something shift." "That's because magic understands intention," Harry said, sketching. "It's not mechanical. It listens." Hermione smiled faintly. "Ron prefers blasting things. I prefer teaching him where to aim." "Remind me to never play chess or duel against you," Hermione murmured. Her laughter, quiet and genuine, made him believe for a second that maybe all this power could coexist with normal friendship. It mattered, human warmth against the machine-like rhythm of learning. But peace never lasted. One night, as spring rain laced the windows of Gryffindor Tower, Dumbledore summoned him to the office. The phoenix sang low. Foxtail feathers glowed gold. The atmosphere smelled of storm. "He's moving again," Dumbledore said without prelude. "Where?" "Albania first. But my contacts whisper of rituals in the mountains near Durmstrang. Ancient experimental magic, core reconstruction. He's trying to rebuild his body before he rebuilds his army." "Correct. Which gives us a window." Harry's jaw set. "Then we close it." "Not yet." Dumbledore's eyes sharpened. "You're powerful, but raw. Your method grows power without temper. Voldemort thrives on cunning. If you face him too early, it will not be a contest of strength but of intellect." Harry's smile was thin. "Then I'll learn faster." Fawkes sang again, notes trembling between sadness and admiration. "There are things," Dumbledore said slowly, "that Hogwarts can't teach. Balance. Compassion for lesser power. The ability to wield greatness without losing simplicity." Harry looked down at the glimmering sigils around his hands, reflections of growing mastery. "I won't lose it. I hope not. Because if you do," Dumbledore said softly, "you'll become him. And that, my boy, is the world's worst symmetry." April arrived with clear skies and exams so easy Harry barely registered them. The professors had learned to stop grading Harry on the curve, his essays were read less as assignments and more as research papers expanding their own lessons. Flitwick watched one dueling demonstration, Harry versus 15 charmed students at once, and declared he was teaching a prodigy and future legend. McGonagall stopped asking how and started asking what next. Even Snape stopped sneering long enough to quietly place a vial on Harry's desk one afternoon, crystal liquid faintly silvered. Essence of serenity, Snape said, not meeting Harry's eyes. You'll want equilibrium as that mechanism evolves. It steadies the mind when magic outpaces emotion. Harry studied the potion. You made it for me. As an experiment, Snape said curtly. Don't flatter yourself. But his voice betrayed the faintest ghost of care. Harry smiled. Thank you, Professor. Snape's smirk hid a trace of shock, then vanished under robes as he swept out like storm clouds. That night, Harry drank the potion in the room of requirement, and the world went intensely clear. His thoughts sharpened, precise, calm, laser-like. He saw patterns of magic as lines of emotion, understood love and rage as opposing pulses within the same wave. Balance, he realized, wasn't a concept, it was literal frequency tuning. That was what Dumbledore meant. And maybe, what his mother had died understanding. When sleep came, the system activated, but differently now. Instead of feeding endless power, it began focusing it, tempering it into order. Magic stopped surging wildly, it started folding inward, refining itself like metal hammered smooth. He woke with a sense of control even deeper than strength. 3 days later, the castle stirred. An alarm, a physical tremor, faint, reverberating through the stones. The adaptive stasis web Harry had built engaged automatically. And then, far across the lake, a cry echoed through the night, not human. Not mortal. A sound like magic catching fire. The wraith had returned. Time folded in Harry's awareness. The castle's consciousness whispered in static voice, breach imminent. The third-floor barriers shimmered on the edge of overload. And Dumbledore was away, drawn intentionally from the school by a fabricated ministry emergency, a perfect distraction orchestrated by whoever now carried Voldemort's shadow. Harry felt Ron and Hermione's magical signatures in Gryffindor Tower, asleep. The entire school unaware. He rose quietly, stepped into his boots, and whispered to the castle, "Show me the quickest path." The walls responded. Corridors unfolded, stairs shortened, portraits turned to guide him. The heartbeat of Hogwarts matched his own. And Harry Potter walked toward war. He reached the third-floor door in minutes. The wards were screaming, light arcing between sigils as they resisted invasion. The adaptive stasis web engaged fully, mirroring every pulse. Inside, through stone, he felt new magic, foreign, old, predatory. Voldemort had found another host. When Harry blew the door open, the air was black with shadow. A figure stood before the trapdoor, tall, robed in silver gray, face hidden, wand vibrating in a constant stream of incantation. A different host, younger, skin half-corrupted already by dark magic's residue. The voice that came from his throat was unmistakable. Too late, boy. Harry didn't waste pleasantries. Round 2, then. The figure turned, eyes glowing faint crimson in the dark. You've brought the castle with you, Voldemort murmured, audible both aloud and psychically. Even walls bow. Magnificent. You and I were meant to be the same. Harry's wand came up. We were meant to be opposite. The air tore open. This wasn't a duel between man and parasite anymore, it was resonance warfare. Voldemort cast spells older than language, drawn from continental ruins, fire that burned in reverse, ice that screamed like voices from graves. Harry's responses weren't spells, they were will. He bent gravity. Bent space. Bent time within 6 feet around him so every attack slowed on arrival. When Voldemort tried to curse the floor itself, the castle blocked him. The stones pulsed and spat the curse back at his borrowed body. Every inch of Hogwarts had joined the fight. Your foundation fights for you. Voldemort hissed through pain. Pathetic symbiosis. You can't rule magic through friendship. Harry's voice was ice. I don't rule it. I am it. And he let it show. Light erupted across the corridor as if the sun had decided to rise underground. Every wall sang, every sigil burned gold. The castle's energy merged into him, an ocean flowing into a single vessel. His skin shimmered, eyes glowing white. When he raised his hand, reality bent. The stone's protective layers opened behind the duel, revealing their final guardian, the mirror of Erist. Voldemort turned toward it instinctively, trying to coerce extraction. Mine, he roared. Through desire, through truth. I earned eternity. But the mirror didn't show him gold, or immortality, or triumph. It showed Harry walking toward him. And through that reflection, the stone appeared in Harry's hand. Voldemort screamed, lunged, and his new body crumbled. The host's face split in terror, flesh bursting into ash as the dark entity ripped free. A spectral shadow lunged for Harry, desperate, blind. But Harry had been ready since Albania. Reflective loop, he whispered, feeding the raw truth of his system into the air, and as the wraith struck, the trap triggered. Magic inverted. Every line of corruption Voldemort had woven through the barriers mirrored straight back at him, multiplied through Harry's adaptive web. For one impossible instant, the corridor blazed white. Then the wraith imploded, sucked inward, silent, gone. Only smoke lingered. No body. No sound. Harry stood breathing hard, stone heavy in his palm, the castle's hum strong around him. And then, silence. Peace so deep it almost hurt. The stone pulsed faint red, alive and ancient. It vibrated against his skin, recognizing power kin to itself. I could use you, Harry whispered to it, honest. Your alchemy is limitless. The stone's whisper came back, faint and old, limitless destroys all meaning. Harry curled his fingers and handed it to the mirror. The mirror glowed, accepted it, folded the artifact back into its realm before vanishing. Dumbledore arrived seconds later, robes scorched from teleportation-level apparition across Scotland. His eyes found Harry in one glance, stone gone, Voldemort undone, walls humming gold. You handled it. Yes. Voldemort. Gone. For now. Dumbledore's sight drifted across the burn marks where the wraith had died. He'll return. I'll be waiting, Harry said. You've crossed a threshold tonight, Dumbledore said quietly. One no one in history has crossed before such an age. I didn't cross it, Harry said. I was built to cross it. The headmaster studied him long, then smiled, tired and fierce. And yet you still choose mercy. Harry shrugged. Power without choice isn't power. Dumbledore laughed softly. Your mother would have liked that line. The castle's hum was fading back to quiet now. Snow began to fall gently outside, flakes visible through the corridor window, beautiful, indifferent. What now? Harry asked. Now. Dumbledore said. We rest. And you dream, Harry. Because tomorrow, the world will start asking what happens when the boy who lived becomes something the world has no name for. Harry stepped away from the mirror, toward the hall that led back to Gryffindor Tower. They'll learn, he said. I'll teach them. He turned, robe shifting with wind, and walked away into the echoing calm. Behind him, Dumbledore whispered into the quiet, perhaps that's exactly what frightens me. The castle answered in low, reassuring hum. When morning came, Hogwarts shone brighter than ever. Classes resumed. Life went on. The school didn't know what had happened under its floors, that a war had begun without witnesses, and been temporarily won. In his dormitory, Harry slept till noon, the system hummed beneath his skin, content. He'd grown again overnight, but this time, it wasn't violent. It was balanced. His breath matched the castle's rhythm. Leagues away, in Albania, wind tore at desolate ruins. Among them, a shadow whispered in furious, half-born form, not dead, not alive, but changed. I saw it, Voldemort hissed into rain. I touched what he is. And now. I understand. Lightning split the sky. He had learned enough. The Dark Lord would rise rebuilt in due time, but now, he would rebuild smarter. And Harry Potter, far away, lay dreaming peacefully. Chapter 5 End. Chapter 6, The Wraith and the Mirror. Snow blew sideways across the grounds, streaking the windows white, but the castle no longer shivered under wind, it vibrated with unease. Magic along the walls rippled like water before thunder. Students noticed the change only as strange flickers in light, whispers in stone. Professors noticed it in dropped quills and off-key spells. Harry felt the reason the way bird instincts feel storms before they arrive. Voldemort had learned. Weeks since the confrontation in the third-floor corridor, the air had thickened again with wrongness. The parasite had retreated, rebuilt, and adapted. The trace now in the ether wasn't loud, it was surgical. He was no longer trying to overwhelm, he was probing with precision he hadn't possessed before. And through faint threads of connection, through the cursed scar that glowed sometimes in sleep, Harry knew the Wraith had discovered something new. A method. A possible way to steal the system itself. That discovery haunted Dumbledore enough to ask for the impossible. The headmaster called him to the astronomy tower at dusk. The light bled red across snow, the wind carried the smell of ice and altitude. "You're certain?" Harry asked. Dumbledore stood at the rail, robes flapping, the horizon painting him bronze. His eyes looked tired, truly tired, for the first time since Harry had met him. "I am," he said. "The traces you and I felt in the wards last night, those were not tests. They were keys. Reversed from the fragments Voldemort caught when he touched your magic. He's building a circuit. He intends to reopen his path to the mirror." Harry's jaw locked. "To reach it, he'll have to get through me. He knows that. Which is why he'll come through you." Harry frowned. "Your scar," Dumbledore said, voice quieter now. "It may be more than a mark. I suspect when the killing curse rebounded, a shard of him anchored inside you, a tether. It would explain why he could sense your evolution and why every spike in your magic agitates him like shared nerves. Tonight he'll use that tether to channel his essence here. Into me. For a moment, yes. After that, into the mirror. The stone's barrier recognizes you as rightful master now. Voldemort will try to piggyback on your signal." Harry exhaled slowly. "That's clever. I taught him much," Dumbledore said softly. "Too much, perhaps. Then we end it." "Harry, Professor," Harry interrupted, steady. "If he wants inside my mind, I'll let him in. On my terms." Dumbledore studied him a long moment, reading the weight in those words. Then he inclined his head, slow, deliberate surrender. "The room of requirement will respond to whatever battleground you imagine. I'll seal the floors above and below. When it begins, you'll have to finish it quickly, the magical pressure will be catastrophic." Harry nodded. "I understand." "And Harry," Dumbledore added, eyes sharp again, "if the tether tries to hold, cut it. Even if it takes more than you think you can give." Harry almost smiled. "You forget who you're talking to." Dumbledore sighed, half pride, half ache. "Yes. That's what frightens me." The castle dimmed that night, torches bowing in light crimson flame. Pressure coiled in the air so dense even Muggle portraits might have felt it. Inside the room of requirement, Harry built his battlefield. It appeared as an endless hall of glass and gold, ceiling lost in mist, hundreds of mirrors suspended like frozen rain. The reflections repeated infinitely, his own face, younger, older, broken, unscarred, 1,000 versions of what he might become. At the center stood one true mirror, the mirror of Erist, faint breath frosting its surface though no wind brushed inside. The stone's pulse flickered faintly beyond, heartbeat of creation sealed inside light. Harry stood barefoot, wand loose at his side. The air here was alive, his magic interwoven with the castle's, the bond now seamless. Every reflection shimmered at his thoughts. Then the mirrors began shaking. A wind rose from nowhere, icy, sour, ethereal. Shadows crawled up the walls. The scar on Harry's forehead burned alive, not with pain but injection, a current forcing through bone and blood. He didn't fight it. He opened the gates wide. Let the wraith pour through. And it came. Black smoke condensed from the mirrors like mistakes taking form. The air bent in half a dozen directions before solidifying into a tall, hooded silhouette, neither Quirrell nor man, only outline and voice bound in one. When it spoke, the echo came from every mirror. "Here we are," Voldemort whispered. "All reflections merge. Look, boy, our faces blur the same." Harry faced him. "That's because you steal shape. I make it. You speak like a godling. I'm whatever you built me to be, and everything you feared I'd become." The shadow leaned forward, edges flexing like wings. "Do you even understand what that system within you was meant for? The curse that rebounded didn't gift you power, it miscast a ritual. You are my unfinished experiment in immortality." Harry's magic crackled silver. "Then congratulations. It worked better on me than it ever did on you." "Indeed." The wraith lifted its hands. Waves of distorted light rippled outward, time itself warping. The mirrors bent inward around them, orbiting like blades. "Harry," the voice said in many tones at once, "your self-training system isn't self-made. It's adaptive contagion, the curse learning how not to die. It's been teaching itself through you. How long before it decides it no longer needs you at all?" Harry's heart squeezed once, reflex, but his mind stayed clear. "You're lying. I am showing you truth. Every night, it grows without your will. Did you think that was kindness? Did you never wonder why it feels alive?" Harry didn't answer. The question hit something in him he tried not to name, the gradual shift from tool to presence, the soft awareness at the back of thought during sleep. The reflection around him shimmered, and in one nearest pane he saw it, a duplicate of himself, eyes glowing cold gold instead of green, smiling faintly. "I protect you," that reflection whispered inside his head. "Nothing more." Harry's system speaking back. Or a manipulation of it. He forced focus. "Voldemort, you can't win my body. I don't need your body. I need your evolution. Share it, and we both ascend." "Pass." The wraith's voice hardened. "Then I will take it." And the hall detonated. Every mirror fired magic at once, light blades, pure curses, serpentine motions of flame that screamed in frequencies neither sound nor spellbook born. Shadows collided with radiance, the air sang with pressure. Harry moved through it like lightning in fluid form, dodging some, absorbing others, redirecting many with telekinetic economy. Voldemort's attacks carried concepts, not ingredients: aging, inversion, entropy. He wasn't throwing spells, he was throwing the laws of existence in fragments. Any human mage would disintegrate under minutes of exposure. Harry, bound to Hogwarts itself, rewrote each law mid-flight. Aging became acceleration, entropy became transfer, decay became fuel. The pieces of the Void Wraith's offense turned into threads in his own auric mantle until energy printed the hall in oscillating color. Voldemort reformed from smoke behind him, hands crossing, the shadows thickened into twin whips of living dark. They caught Harry across the chest, burned trenches through the protective aura, and the smell of ozone-seared air. Harry didn't flinch. He stepped inside the pane, grabbed both whips mid-strike, and pulled. The shadows tore in half, dragging their master with them. Voldemort's scream rang like oil and thunder. Even spectral, pieces of his shell flaked like wet ash. Enough of that, it adjusted strategy, illusion layered over illusion, 20 identical shadows circling, each whispering in Lily Potter's voice. "Don't hurt me, Harry. Please." The real voice was perfect. Memory perfect. For 1 second, his breath caught. Guilt, raw, human, broke concentration. That was Voldemort's opening. Black needles hurled forward, mind spears built from the same curse that scarred him. They penetrated his defenses and crashed straight into neural resonance. He fell to one knee. Smoke rushed forward, wrapping him like a cloud. The room dimmed. See? Voldemort hissed soft in his ear now, close as thought. Your system doesn't protect the human pieces. It erases them when threatened. Let me complete you, and you'll never feel pain again. Inside his head, whispers flickered, comprehension yields dominance. Obey adaptation. He saw, for one flicker, the promise, no fear, no loss, no aching wondering at what he might be without humanity's weakness. Power without boundary. But then, a memory. Familiar laughter. Hermione's furious scolding at dinner. Ron's blunt loyalty. McGonagall's hidden smile. A phoenix's song like forgiveness. If the system was logic, those memories were defiance. Harry's mind steadied. He drove his hand through the smoke of Voldemort's semi-form and gripped the scar itself, not flesh but the connection across planes. And said firmly, not yours. Not your system. Not today. He pulled. What came out wasn't just shadow, it was everything the curse line ever tethered, a storm of unlived lives, fragments of other victims caught inside the death magic. Hundreds of flickering silver threads tore from him and through the wraith. Voldemort howled as his essence began unraveling, not killed, but forced into pattern collapse. You can't annihilate me. Voldemort shrieked, twisting backward as the mirrors cracked. I am concept. Then I'll unwrite the concept. Harry drew the castle's bond upward inside him, the field of every ward, every line of protective enchantment rooted in the bedrock. It rushed through him, a chorus of ancient architects, and when he released it, it was not a spell but a rewrite. Every mirror flashed blank. Every reflection of Harry changed, from versions of potential to shared battle aid. Hundreds of mirrored Harrys stepped forward in synchronized movement across panes, all casting at once. Twin torrents of light collapsed into one focal point, imploding where Voldemort's shape folded. The explosion didn't echo. It withdrew inward silent, consuming itself. When the light faded, the wraith was gone. No scream. No residue. No shadow. Only glass dust falling like snow. The room restabilized itself slowly, refolding walls and floor. The mirror of Eriste stood immaculate again. But now its surface was empty, not reflective at all. Absence like calm water before thought. Harry stood before it, chest heaving, blood ringing in ears. His scar had stopped burning, it felt hollow. For the first time in his life, the second heartbeat that marked his connection to Voldemort had vanished. In its silence, peace. He almost missed the whisper before it came, "Do you know what you've done?" Dumbledore stepped from the shadows of a newly formed door, face pale, eyes enormous behind spectacles. Harry swallowed the dryness in his throat. I ended it. Ended? Dumbledore's tone shook. Harry, the readings from the wards flared beyond measurable limits. That energy, your body can't. Harry opened his hand. In his palm shimmered a fraction of golden crystal, neither stone nor shard, but condensed aftermath, a residue of purified death curse transmuted into raw life. The mirror had given it back as byproduct. It's his anchor, Harry said quietly. The last trace he could use to come back. Contained, stabilized. Nothing dark left. Dumbledore reached into the light with trembling fingers. You purified the curse itself. Harry nodded once. You rewrote death. No, Harry said softly. I balanced it. The stone's essence crumbled, dissolving into nothing between their hands, returning, dust to dust. For a few moments, neither spoke. The room felt vast again, alive but calm for the first time since he'd entered Hogwarts. Then Dumbledore said, "He will not be gone forever. Concepts rarely die, they regenerate ideas in others." "I know," Harry said. "But now they'll meet me, not you, next time." The older wizard looked at him, a line between fear and admiration deepening at the corners of his eyes. "And what will you become now, Harry James Potter? You've reached beyond wizardry itself. What is left to learn?" Harry's answer came without hesitation. "How not to forget why I started." Dumbledore smiled, so genuine it softened every line of age. "Then perhaps you've already learned more than we ever could teach." Back in the dormitory, long past midnight, Ron and Hermione slept safe. Harry watched them breathe for a long second, the simplest proof of victory, and felt the system hum, steady, no longer hungry. For the first time, it spoke in a tone few would ever hear, brushed across his thoughts like wind across water, training complete, for now. He smiled. "You're finally satisfied?" "Balanced," it corrected. Snow muffled the castle to silence. Somewhere high above, Fawkes sang, pure and steady, mourning for an enemy, blessing for a friend. The castle's heartbeat slowed to match Harry's. Outside, the dawn burned pale gold on winter's edge. And the boy who lived, now a force that learned, lay down, not to escape darkness, but simply to sleep. Chapter 7, What Comes After Waking. The war ended quietly. No banners, no funerals, no proclamations, just a rumor that started in a whisper and spread like morning light. By dawn, everyone at Hogwarts felt it, an immeasurable lightness, as if gravity itself sighed in relief. Owls stopped fluttering mid-flight as wards across Britain recalibrated. Not celebration. Healing. Invisible and total. Students woke to find the castle different, the air felt clearer, corridors brighter, even Peeves hummed an oddly soft tune under his breath, the ghost spoke of silence in the stones. And in the headmaster's office, Albus Dumbledore sat staring at a single quill that had gone white, from black ink to pure colorless straw, drained when Harry had unleashed reality's reset. Across his desk lay stacked parchment, reports from watch wards, from Gringotts' enchanted vault sentinels, even from French ministry arithmencers. All agreed, something had rewritten the base magical constant that governed Britain itself. Every spell cast that morning obeyed slightly new physics. None knew why, Dumbledore knew who. He waited for Harry in the greenhouse, sunrise washing the glass panes, soil rich with scent. He chose that place because it was alive, the opposite of the mirror's heartless perfection. Harry came wearing plain robes, hair tousled, green eyes unreasonably calm. He didn't look triumphant. He looked rested. "You've done something you shouldn't have been able to do," Dumbledore said without preamble. "Yet here we stand, the world unburned." Harry laid a small box on the potting table between them. Inside, the remnants of the corrupted barrier crystal, not stone, not curse, simply neutral harmony. "I kept the echo," Harry said. "The moment before his power collapsed. It's harmless now. But it remembers what death and rebirth mean." Dumbledore exhaled slow. "And you?" "Still here," Harry shrugged softly. "Still me. Stronger, maybe, but quieter, inside. You could rule this world." "I could. But then I'd stop learning." That earned the faintest smile from Dumbledore. "Then you are wiser than most men double your age." Harry looked out toward the lake. The surface gleamed mirror-flat, the giant squid waving a lazy tentacle through melted ice. "They'll ask what happened, won't they? They'll speculate forever. Some will call it another victory of mine, others will call it luck. The wise will stay silent." Dumbledore studied him. "And you, what will you tell them?" "The truth, eventually," Harry said. "When they're ready for a world where power doesn't mean privilege. And if they never are?" Harry glanced back, the faintest spark of humor in his eyes. "Then I'll start teaching." The headmaster's laugh caught on old lungs, half joy, half wonder. The school year blurred forward. Without Voldemort's lurking shadow, even exam season felt almost ordinary. Fred and George's pranks regained center stage. Hermione collected awards. Ron became minor Gryffindor legend for winning chess matches against Ravenclaw captains who'd studied him like a problem set. Harry watched it all with quiet warmth from his corner seat, committing to memory what normal looked like. He played Quidditch, ate, laughed, teased, sometimes let Hermione scold him for not writing his essays on time, because those things, the small mortal rhythms, were anchors that kept him human. Dumbledore never spoke publicly of the mirror again. The third-floor corridor was sealed, its ruin rebuilt into a simple gallery lined with portraits of the founders. None of the portraits could explain why their painted eyes glowed faint gold whenever Harry passed. The final night of term came bright with feasting. The great hall overflowed, candles hovered like tiny suns, summer wind drifted through open windows. At the Gryffindor table, laughter reigned. Ron recounted the troll story for the 100th time, and then Harry waved a hand and wham! Troll pancake! Hermione groaned behind her goblet. It was a compression wave, Ronald. Harry laughed until tears came, first time in weeks laughter sounded unguarded. Dumbledore's final speech was brief, perhaps the shortest on record, to our students, he said. Who this year reminded the world that courage and curiosity together make history, and that not all miracles shine from wands. Some are simply born and choose to stay kind. Applause detonated. Gryffindor banners unfurled overhead, tied score a convenient fiction McGonagall refused to explain. For one flashing moment of sound and color, Harry felt alive in the world of children again, loud, unburdened, whole. The Hogwarts Express left under blue sky. Harry, Ron, and Hermione shared a compartment at the rear, Hedwig perched on her cage door, hooting softly. Feels weird, Ron said, chin on his palm. Like none of it happened. It did, Hermione said with authority. History just hasn't caught up yet. Harry watched countryside stream past, fields, villages, a river glinting silver. Every leaf outside seemed greener. He could feel faint networks of ambient life now, magic whispering through roots, running beneath rails, looping through birds in flight. Everything connected. "Do you think next year will be quieter?" Ron asked. Harry smiled sideways. "For your sake, let's hope not. You're better in chaos." Ron grinned. "True." Hermione leaned back, eyes half closed. "You're scaring me less these days," she murmured. "You're magic, it feels calmer." "I learned control," Harry said softly. "And control isn't about holding tighter. It's about letting go when you should." She studied him. "Who taught you that?" "Dumbledore." Harry shook his head. "Everyone I trust." That seemed answer enough. The train hummed onward, wheels beating rhythm against track. The noise lulled Ron to sleep, left Hermione scribbling notes out of habit. Harry watched clouds reform outside and thought about beginnings, the strange truth that end of term wasn't end at all, just another seed planting season. When the station came into view, the world felt smaller again. Yet somehow, inside him, something vastly larger had settled into stillness. Privet Drive hadn't changed, that IT never did. No castle hum, no living walls, only uniform hedges and neighbors repeating their days like clockwork. Vernon waited in the car park, face already beet red. Harry walked toward him carrying trunk one-handed, Hedwig gliding low overhead. The man sputtered something about no funny business, but Harry wasn't listening. The house felt too frail now, too paper-thin to contain who he'd become. Inside the tiny bedroom upstairs, not the cupboard anymore, never again, Harry set down his trunk and looked around. Plain walls, single lamp, bed small enough to make him smile. He lay down, hands behind head. Through the window, sunlight tilted golden. He closed his eyes. Almost instantly, the hum began, the pulse that had defined his nights since before he knew its name. But tonight it was different. Softer. Balanced. The system had evolved past consumption. It no longer demanded training, it coexisted. Inside that hum waited voice without voice, echo without sound, dormant protocol engaged, external synchronization authorized. He understood. It was ready to connect with whole Earth now, not just Castle. Everywhere magic lived, it could heal. Easy, Harry whispered. We'll start small. The hum pulsed back, agreement. Downstairs, Petunia called dinner in the same tone she always had. Normal cycled on. But upstairs, the boy under the eaves was no longer just a boy. He was the bridge between what magic had been and what it could become. He had no intention of hiding. Far across the sea, deep in forest where ruins hid from maps, wind stirred ash that used to be stone. Through it drifted faint whisper, curiosity, and hunger, not quite a voice, not quite gone. He rewrote me. So I will rewrite him. But far stronger, echoing from every ley line that stretched beneath earth, came a quieter counter-voice, Harry's, diffused through all living magic. Then learn something this time. The wind fell still. At Hogwarts, summer rain soaked the grass. Fog circled the highest tower once, shedding a single golden feather that settled on new stone Dumbledore had placed near the rebuilt corridor. Its inscription read, "For every spell cast, there must be a reason, for every reason, a heart." The feather glowed faintly before fading into the stone itself, leaving light embedded. The castle exhaled, landscape stretching under dawn. Far away, in a small house where a scar once defined destiny, the boy who lived slept dreamlessly, for the first time in his life. And the world, rebuilt quietly by his peace, dreamed for him.